This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
We've got some very serious things to discuss today. I'm going to begin with something that thankfully still made Thomas's headlines there, still made Thomas's news bulletin. But I want to pause for a moment to reflect upon the way in which we become inured to tragedy or even to horror. The way in which, I think as a consequence of evolutionary biology, we as a species become less shocked by the same thing the more we are exposed to it. I'm not expecting any prizes for this observation, but sometimes I find it helpful to have things pointed out to me, and I wonder whether you are the same. Imagine if you were, I don't know when you were born, obviously, but let's suppose that you were growing up in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. And your mum had the news on in the car, or your dad was listening to the news on the way to school. And you heard in the news as a child in this country that a baby had died in the English Channel last night. A baby crossing the English Channel in a small boat had died. A baby had died. How would those words have reached you? And I think it wouldn't have been that different as an adult the first time you heard it. A baby has died in the English Channel. If it was a baby on a yacht being crewed, and I don't mean a multi-million pound yacht, although obviously if it was a multi-million pound yacht, the story would be even bigger. But if a British baby on holiday had fallen off a boat, whether a pleasure boat or a ferry or a family yacht, it would still merit attention on a level that would be what you might call traffic stopping. I wonder how far we are from not even sticking it in our news bulletin next time it happens. It's still newsworthy that a baby has died, but it didn't stop you in your tracks this morning. I hope it did. I noted that it didn't stop me in mine until I noted it, and then it did. But it highlights, I think, that wherever you are in the world, you do get used to horror. You do get used to tragedy. Obviously, there are other factors at play here. The political effort put into persuading British people to despise that baby, to wish that baby harm, to want that baby to die is epic and continuing, up to and including membership of the House of Commons now. But still, a baby has died in the English Channel while trying to get here. 65 other people rescued at the scene, some of whom were in the water. The baby was found unconscious and later declared dead. So, this is what happens when you do what I do for a living, and you have sometimes 3 or 4 stories competing for the bulk of your attention in the morning. Because that one is not competing for your attention really today, is it? It kind of objectively should be. If this was the first baby to have died in the English Channel in 20 years, the story would be absolutely huge. But I do this for a living, and I can't tell you how many babies have died in the English Channel in the last 10 years. I'm not particularly embarrassed by that, but I know it's more than one. If it was to be human lives in total, then obviously the figure would be even greater. There's a great line. One death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic. Andrew has reminded me of that. And you know, somewhere between those two positions, somewhere between 1 and 1 million, the tragedy becomes a statistic. And we're not quite there yet. It's still in the news. It's still in the news bulletins. And I don't know why, but as I read about the accidental killing, actually, essentially of the Hamas leader by IDF troops, Yahya Sinwar, a bloodthirsty terrorist responsible for planning the mastermind, the evil mastermind behind the 7th of October attacks on Israel. As I read about him being killed by the IDF, eliminated, as the Israeli media correctly reported it, I did find myself wondering about what would have happened if that had happened in the first wave of Israel's attacks on Gaza. I found myself wondering whether the international pressure, which is now proving utterly impotent in the face of Benjamin Netanyahu's continuing carnage in both Gaza and latterly Lebanon, whether or not that international pressure would have been actually magnified by the successful elimination of Sinwar. If the leader of Hamas had been killed in the second week of October 2023, would Benjamin Netanyahu in October 2024 still be able to continue killing people in Gaza and in Lebanon with impunity? I mean, with the shouts and the pleas of the international community ringing in his ears, but with the earplugs firmly inserted. And I don't know, and nor do you. But if that enormous achievement stroke success had been accomplished in week one of the attack upon Gaza, then the calls upon Netanyahu to stay his hand would perhaps have carried more weight. And I mention this because in the same way that the baby in the English Channel depicts the way that we actually don't have the same attitude to the same events every time they happen, we don't know. Counterfactuals are sometimes unhelpful, sometimes enormously illustrative. They certainly focus the mind, but we don't know whether or not on October the 9th of last year, Benjamin Netanyahu was planning to kill 40, 50,000 people in Gaza and then start bombing Lebanon, and start bombing schools and hospitals all over the territories that border Israel. We don't know. There's plenty of evidence in his past that he quite fancied the idea, but whether he thought this would give him the opportunity to do so, we don't know. We may never know. We may never know. And neither do we know what happens next. But I've got a feeling, and in many ways, not in many ways, I mean, I desperately hope I'm wrong, but I'm not sure this will change anything. I'm not sure that for all the talk in the earliest of days of this being a necessary response to the attack upon Israel on October the 7th, I'm not sure that actually taking out the man who planned it will have any impact whatsoever upon the continuing killing of civilians by Israel. I don't think it will. And I think something else awful has happened as well in that intervening year. I think when you look at two things, the idea that you'll have the same response on both occasions is incredibly destroyed. It's an incredibly busted flush when you think about what is now being done in the name of defending Israel. The stuff that's been done now is exactly the stuff that people rang me to tell me last year they would never tolerate. The idea that Israel would bomb hospitals or bomb schools was absolutely anathema. There was some attempts to pretend that it was all justified by human shields or something, but deep down, everybody felt that the bombing, for example, of tents outside hospitals containing people on IVF drips who were set to be burnt alive, you'd never countenance that. You could never be in support of that, however passionate your support for the modern state of Israel, however passionate your support for Benjamin Netanyahu. You would never have rung me in October of last year to tell me that you couldn't wait to see tents burning outside hospitals containing people who'd already been displaced 3, 4, 5 times. So 23 people killed in Lebanon, we heard from the Times correspondent earlier this week. The idea that anything is going to stop this march is now so ridiculous that even the killing of the leader of Hamas won't provide a nanosecond of pause. You see what I mean? Imagine if the leader of Hamas had been taken out a year ago. What would the conversation look like? What would the conversation sound like? Imagine if the leader of Hamas had been taken out a year ago and Benjamin Netanyahu turned around and said, I've hardly started. I want to kill at least 40,000 more people in Gaza, and then I'm going to turn my attention on Lebanon. I don't know. It's a counterfactual. If the world could have turned around and said, you can't, maybe it would have carried a little bit more weight, because the world has turned around and said you can't a million times now, and Benjamin Netanyahu has replied in the strongest of terms, oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. IV drips, I think. You're so mean to me sometimes. You try doing this every single day without any notes or scripts. Of course I'm going to misspeak occasionally. Obviously not an IVF drip. It's an IV drip. I'm happy to clarify. Because then I turn my attention to another story about 10 Likud members of parliament, MKs, members of the Knesset. And If I told you this a year ago, how would you have responded? All right, so the troops are going into Gaza. The death toll is ticking up now. The children are dying. The people are being displaced. It's all justifiable because hostages and elimination of Hamas and human shields. Almost a third of lawmakers in Benjamin Netanyahu's party, including 10 of his party's MPs, are to participate in an event organised by a settlement movement which is calling for, it's an ultra-nationalist march, calling for the settlement of Gaza. The conference is titled Preparing to Resettle Gaza, and the goal is moving Israeli people into territory vacated forcibly by Palestinians. That is a rally set to be attended by the Social Equality Minister in Israel. Let me say that again. The Social Equality Minister is slated to attend a rally that will encourage Israelis to steal the land and the homes of forcibly relocated, or if you prefer, ethnically cleansed, or quite possibly murdered Palestinian civilians. The Social Equality Minister is going. Other members of the Knesset include Avishai Baron, Sasson Greta, Tali Gottlieb, Eli Dalal, Nissim Vachuri, Hanok Milwitsky, Ariel Kulna, Kati Shitrit, and Osher Shkalim. It is organised by an organisation that advocates for Jewish settlement in the West Bank, where it has also already helped establish, and this is an irrefutable linguistic description, illegal settlement outposts. Illegal settlement outposts. So on the day that we discover Israel has thankfully removed the leader of Hamas from the map, we discover that members of Benjamin Netanyahu's government are planning to spend their weekend calling for land forcibly vacated through relocation, ethnic cleansing, or death, whatever you prefer. Members of the government, 32 lawmakers in Benjamin Netanyahu's party, 10 of them are attending, including one cabinet minister, and 2 others we can roundly conclude will be broadly supportive of the whole plan, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. So, I don't know how many times we can sit here and ask, how does it end? Because they keep telling us. How will it end? What's that you say? A third of the governing party, a third of the lawmakers in Benjamin Netanyahu's government are going to be marching this weekend in support of moving settlers into Gaza, into the bombed out remains of what was once a pretty unpleasant and a hideously overpopulated area, but at least one where you didn't run the certain risk of being killed if you stayed put. They're going to move in there. Extraordinary. Janet has been in touch. She says, if James doesn't stop his anti-Israel rhetoric, he will stir up a tsunami of hatred towards the Jewish community in the UK. Janet's just listened to exactly the same words that you've just listened to. Janet's just listened to me. I don't want to use the word celebrating, but I will. Celebrating the elimination of the leader of Hamas, mourning the continuing carnage of Palestinian civilians, and condemning the decision by 10 members of Benjamin Netanyahu's government to essentially, not even essentially, to quite deliberately demand that the land vacated by many of the dead Palestinians be occupied illegally by Israelis. But Janet has heard anti-Israel rhetoric and warned that it will stir up a tsunami of hatred towards the Jewish community in the UK. Janet, you've put your surname there. I don't think it would be fair of me to read it out. But do you honestly think the entire Jewish community in the UK is in favour of more illegal occupations, is in favour of more death in Gaza, in Lebanon, more schools being bombed, more hospitals being immolated, more people burning alive while attached to IV drips? Because if you're saying that, I'm afraid you're in danger of whipping up a tsunami of hatred towards the Jewish community in the UK. But thankfully, I'm here to tell everybody listening to this programme that that is not the case. Regardless of your faith, your ethnicity, your background, or your religion, millions of people will be utterly repulsed by what we're watching. But the question, of course, of what happens next is a question that people like Janet don't want people like you to answer. Because what happens next is what they're telling us will happen next. What happens next is contained within this quote on the WhatsApp channel ran by the organisation running this protest set to be attended by a third of the flipping government. And that statement is this: victory is settlement. It is doable. Now, even if this were a handful of fringe extremists, even if this were we know that at least one member of the cabinet has terrorist convictions. We know exactly where Itamar Ben-Gvir and Smotrich come from and where they dream of being. We know that, and they're in the heart of government. But even if they weren't, even if no politicians were involved in this, if a popular movement within Israel was calling for the settlement of Gaza, victory is settlement, it is doable, you'd still be a little bit reluctant because of people like Janet to have a conversation about whether that's actually the plan. But when it's a third of lawmakers, when it is, and they're the ones that are turning up, how many people will be privately or silently supportive of it without yet being ready to add their name, add their face to the list of lawmakers in the heart of Israel's government describing settlement of Gaza as victory, describing ethnic cleansing as doable, describing a second Nakba as the mission. 0345 6060 973. That's the number you need, James. James O'Brien is anti-Semitic and a disgrace to broadcasting. Sack him now. James has listened to exactly the same broadcast that you've listened to. Again, you provide your surname, but I won't read it out. It might make you identifiable. I'm sure you'd be safe, but you're the ones warning against repercussions for a simple description of what is happening. Tens of thousands of people are dead. Hospitals are being bombed. Schools are being attacked. People are being set on fire. And the governing party, a third of the governing party, is planning on spending this weekend calling for the cleansed territory to be occupied illegally by Israelis. And you think that there's something anti-Semitic about describing the truth, the facts. Whew. So is this going to change anything? A year ago, a headline describing the mastermind of Hamas being killed by IDF troops would have prompted celebration, relief, and hope. Celebration that this murderous maniac had been taken off the map. Relief that the prospect of Israel's response being worse than the original provocation was in retreat. And hope that the civilian death toll caused, and many would say necessitated, by the October the 7th terror attack would end up being considerably lower than it might otherwise have been. So here we are, almost 50,000 deaths in. The leader of Hamas taken off the map, and unless you have got some brilliant arguments and some profound insights and some very clever comments to make, the grim and hideous conclusion that this is not going to change anything. And the bigger story today is not the killing of Yahya Sinwar. The bigger story today is 1/3 of Benjamin Netanyahu's closest allies describing settlement as victory and planning to spend their weekend calling for the cleansed territory of the Gaza Strip to be occupied illegally by Israelis. Go on, call me now and tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
24 minutes after 10. I think it's time to stop saying, what's the plan? How does it end? What is the direction of traffic? 2 stories. Marry them together and I think you get your answer. The leader of Hamas has been killed. And the leaders of Israel are spending the weekend calling for the settlement of Gaza by, the illegal settlement of Gaza by Israelis. And when I say the leaders of Israel, I mean a third of the government. A third of the lawmakers in Netanyahu's party to participate in this event. So, I don't want to read out all the unpleasant and not desperately intelligent messages that I get. It's certainly far too serious territory to talk of Idiot's Corner. Oh, well, I think we'll make an exception for Rick. Rick says, still quoting Hamas death numbers, are you? You are literally a propaganda tool. Rick, they provide the names, mate. They provide the names. It's all checkable. And, of course, I'm sure that you campaign passionately for Western journalists to be allowed into the Gaza Strip so that they would be able to check the claims being made by the Palestinian Health Ministry. Otherwise, I'm afraid, mate, that the words propaganda tool only apply to one of us, especially perhaps tool. The other argument that here's Darren. I can't listen to James O'Brien anymore on LBC. Well, it's not compulsory. He's so anti-Israel, it's outrageous. You'll remember, Darren has heard me describe exactly the same facts that you have heard me describe. Darren has heard me celebrate or applaud the killing of the leader of Hamas. Darren has heard me describe that a third of the Likud government is planning to spend the weekend calling for the illegal settlement of Gaza. Darren has heard me describe the death toll in Gaza and in Lebanon, and he's decided that is anti-Israel. He tells me that 95% of Israelis or Jews would not have any interest in moving to Gaza or the West Bank. Yes, there are some right-wing idiots, but at least our right-wing civilian idiots don't go into Gaza looking to kill everyone. I don't understand all of that message, but you don't understand what the phrase almost a third of lawmakers in Netanyahu's party means. Whatever little lies you tell yourself about support or numbers or statistics, this is almost a third of the entire government. And if you add Smotrich and Ben-Gvir to the list, which I think everybody honest can do, then it's over a third of lawmakers in Likud, in the Likud part of the government, so in Netanyahu's party. Extraordinary. But I think we know the answer now, don't we, to what the plan is. Barbara is in Havant. Barbara, what would you like to say?
Well, good morning,
Hello,
James. I get extremely upset by this topic. I'm a Jewish person, Jewish woman, 75 years old, whose mother's family were murdered during the Holocaust. Yes. I think about it practically every day, and I would just like to say the lesson of the Holocaust is not that we visit mayhem, destruction, and hatred on another people. You are not anti-Semitic. You quite rightly, like any sane person, criticise the current Israeli government because the idea that they, one, will wipe out Hamas is a joke, because of course they won't. By doing what they have done, they are just creating several more generations of Hamas and Hamas-like organizations. And the idea that this is going to make Israel more secure is, quite frankly, for the birds, for the above reason. Of course it isn't. And the fact that, I didn't even know this, that so many MPs of the Likud party are actually talking about illegally resettling Gaza. I mean, I know what's wrong with these people. I think I know. I think they are in a state of hyper-reactivity. Nobody's told them to go and see en masse a therapist so that they can deal with their undoubted fears, fear and issues in a more sane way.
Generational trauma, I think.
Yes, there's certainly an
which
element
you have,
but it's just,
I suspect, although yours is manifested in rather different ways.
Yes, all Jews have that in their genes. You know, it's a fact. But this is not the way to do it. If you've been abused as a child and you turn out statistically to be an abuser, we don't just say, "Oh, that's fine, just get on with it." You get other people say, "No, we can understand where this all comes from, but it's not good enough. You just can't go about this. This has to stop, and this really has to stop. I am ashamed." And don't let anybody tell me what the lessons of the Holocaust are. These people have hijacked the Holocaust, as I think the director of that film said, to visit mayhem and hatred on other people, and it just is not good enough. And I have disassociated myself from Israel. I have nothing in common with these people. I still feel I'm Jewish. That is deeply rooted in me, but I have no truck with these people. They are vile, they are racist, and they are, to my mind, mad, needing help.
If we if we park the idea of, I mean, needing help is a much nicer word than mad, and I understand why you moved so gracefully from one to the other. But I also understand your emotion and your anger and the courage that it takes for you to even continue looking at these issues. But I run something by you, because the words you said to me a moment ago about it will not make Israel any safer. And my first impulse was, that's so obvious. She's so right. And then I thought, but obviously these people think that somehow it will. So the life of the illegal settler is one about which most people in this country don't know an awful lot. They are operating with impunity, really, in territories that are, according to every interpretation of international law, stolen. They continue to visit appalling abuses and treatment upon people living legally in the same areas, and continue in cases to remove them. But in a way, they're also closer to the risk. They're closer to the danger. I mean, it's no coincidence that the October the 7th terror attack involved a crossing of the border from Gaza, not currently illegally settled, but the closer you are to the border, as our friend Mao Zinan, who lost both of his parents that day and who was speaking to us on the anniversary of October the 7th, as he reminded us, you know the risk. The closer to the border you are. So do you think there is, if we were to try to apply logic to what we both find so impenetrable, do you think there is a notion that the further you push the illegal settlements, the bigger the buffer becomes between the threat on the other side of the border, whether it's a legal or an illegal border, and the parts of Israel that will be much and measurably safer, and still, of course, perhaps at risk from missiles, but we know that the missile defense systems are the most powerful in the world. So is that the logic? Is the logic the idea, we don't care if it breaches international law, we don't really care how many Palestinians die, we certainly don't care how many get ethnically cleansed or forcibly removed, because the bigger we make that buffer, where the illegal settlement is the buffer, the safer the rest of Israel becomes?
I guess probably in a strictly practical way, I can see that if you put up enough walls and create enough buffers between areas, you might gain some sort of, but at what cost? Who would want to live like that?
But we know that people do, and we know that Smotrich or Ben Gvir, I forget which one, comes very, very, very much from that stock, and he has had the ear of Netanyahu now for the longest time. Yeah,
but I think the issue is psychologically, the more you put up the walls, the more you put up the buffers, the greater the fear, the greater the paranoia, the greater the reactivity when anything happens.
I mean, where does it end?
You're in a spiral of utter despair, as far as I can see, and I don't often use the word, but I think we are now in a desperate situation, and it is. I've had to. I mean, I don't look at it, but it has to be dealt with, and
it has to be talked about.
And it has to be talked about, but. These people that phone up and say that you're anti-Semitic,
they don't really phone up, Barbara. They mostly just text.
Send messages.
Yes,
I feel for them because they are in a paranoid state, and a state of paranoia, which I really understand.
Of course,
but no, we cannot not say anything about Israel because there was a Holocaust. It just is disingenuous and dishonest and does no one any favours.
Barbara, thank you. And I'm sorry that I have the grim responsibility of bringing these events and these stories to your attention. I was struck by you mentioning, even with your deep and profound interest and investment, familial, emotional, personal investment in all of these matters, that even you had not heard previously of the plans for this march. I can't always tell whether questions are in good faith or not, but Richard's asked for my source for this claim. Well, I read out the names. I read out the names of the members of the Knesset, but I read them from an article in the Times of Israel, mate. So I presume that's an acceptable source. But how significant is it, I wonder, that for the huge majority of people listening to this programme, Barbara included, this will be the very, very first time you've heard about it. 10:34 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:38. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the killing of the mastermind behind the October the 7th terror attacks has incredibly prompted very little confidence that anything will change. regarding the continuing carnage in Gaza and latterly Lebanon, and of course the more recent development, although you see it more of a crystallizing of what was there all along, but not necessarily in plain sight, of Benjamin Netanyahu's party, 10 of the 32 lawmakers in it, poised to participate in a conference this weekend titled Preparing to Resettle Gaza. And it will call for, well, I'll tell you what it says, because they've told us. It says victory is settlement. So how does it end? For 10 members at least of Benjamin Netanyahu's lawmaking contingent of his party, it ends in a settlement of the Gaza Strip, the illegal settlement of the Gaza Strip. And the conversation seems to be too uncomfortable for many people, which is why it's important to focus exclusively on facts. 10:39 is the time. Zara is in Leicester. Zara, what would you like to say?
I'd like to thank you, first and foremost, for speaking up, because so very few people have spoken up this year, have wanted to share the truth and facts.
Yeah, can I just pause you there? I know there is, and I'm grateful, and I do. I think when I've read out so many very personal attacks on me, it's a bit disingenuous of me to say that I don't want to make it about me. But I do think it's important to remember that one's minds change as the facts change. So if the opinion you hold today about all of this is the same as the opinion that you held on October the 8th, then something's gone a little bit haywire. The use of words like proportionate. I'm proud of my coverage of this story, but people who applaud me today would not have applauded me last October.
I did, actually.
Oh, did you?
Did.
All right, sorry. I take that all back then, sorry.
I think on October the 12th last year,
yes.
when I was at the Cheltenham Festival,
yes.
and I thanked you then.
Okay.
I didn't, for a life of me, think that we'd be speaking a year on.
No,
about
I don't think either of us did. I don't think. Thank you. All right, I take that back. In your case,
but
your second point, yes.
Yeah. So my second point is I wanted to respond to Janet and James,
yes,
and all the others that are chastising you and telling you that you're fueling hatred towards Israel.
Yes.
First and foremost, the word anti-Semitism has been weakened, has been cheapened because of this conflation with Israel. I'm a Muslim. I have absolutely no problem with anybody calling out MBS in Saudi, calling out his government, his actions. Why would I be upset if a country that I don't live in, that I have a connection to because of my religion, is being called out for its appalling behaviour? It needs to stop. Jewish people, or I'm not sure it's the same with Muslims, I guess, but I question how Jewish these people are, because your faith cannot be as strong if you think that it's okay to kill civilians, etc. It just can't. And as Barbara was saying,
there's a bit of context in terms of what war is, but when the imbalance is so profound, when the disproportionality is so clear, then...
and also, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even call this a war, because it's disproportionate. You're fighting people who don't have any weapons. That they don't have the bombs, aerial bombs. They don't have any airplanes, etc. It's hardly the same. It's not an equal fight.
They had enough weapons to kill 1,200 people on October the 7th. So again, I'm being careful in your...
I read recently, obviously 1,200 is inaccurate as well, isn't it? Because I think it's been taken down to 900 and something. But I read recently that Sinwar, it was in the Washington Post, had said, I think 3 days after October the 7th, that he was quite surprised at what had unfolded because it wasn't the plan. His Al-Qassam brigade had broken in, and the plan was to take hostages. But when other idiots near the border had seen that the fence had been broken, they went in and did all sorts of other things. And I find it really interesting because there was so much anger and propaganda around that time, with the fake news like 40 beheaded babies, etc., that we didn't
a lot
really
of people
get the real news.
A lot of people listening won't know that claim, that story. It depends how much of LBC they listen to, of course, but they'll have heard the original reports in gory detail, but they may not know that the reports have been fairly profoundly revised in the aftermath. But I don't want to distract you from the central point that you ran into.
So my point is that people who are Jewish, well, let me start again. One of the people I know that is Jewish, she's written an article this week in the Jewish Chronicle, and she questions whether she'd be safer here or in England, in Israel, because one of her Israeli friends had said, I think it was her sister that said that you should come here now because you're safer here.
That's terrible.
And she said, actually, no, I feel safer here because there's a lot of support for Jewish people. And I don't feel comfortable going out to marches in London, but I don't go to central London on the weekend anyway, so it doesn't affect me. Yes, I've lost a couple of Facebook friends, but I've gained a lot of support too, and I feel absolutely more safer here than I would in Israel. And supporting Barbara's point that, of course, you're not safer in Israel. What they've done, I mean, they've not just made enemies in Gaza and Palestine, they've made enemies globally. People who are willing to support Israel to the hilt last year absolutely do not. I personally cannot see...
That's missing from the debate, though. Because and that's why I picked you up. That's why I picked you up unfairly at the beginning of this conversation, because I think that there would be a huge constituency of people who were ready for Israel to respond. I hate these inadequate words, robustly, after the October the 7th terror attack, but can't possibly be supportive of much of what's happened subsequently. And yet,
and they don't
I think many people have to continue to double down, and the alternative is to either be silent or look the other way, I suppose.
And but I think for me the most devastating thing this entire year is knowing that there are people that we live amongst that are willing to look away from brutal murder. And babies rotting and decomposing in hospitals being bombed, as you said, things that we never envisioned. And there are people out there, Zionists, or Jewish people, that conflate this with Sudan, and they'll say, you don't speak up for Sudan, you didn't speak up for so-and-so, why you're just attacking Israel because you hate Jews. And that's absolutely, there's no comparison globally in this century that anyone in any country has done this to anyone else. You cannot compare what Israel is doing anywhere else in the world. We have to call it out, and if we don't, it's a stain upon our conscience, and it's a stain upon humanity.
And the settlement story, you've taken me right up to the wire. The settlement story is evidence, perhaps, of the continuing momentum away from what was defensible in the first instance, but moved into indefensible at some unspecified point subsequently. And to clarify one of the points that Zara made, because again, I think a lot of people won't know, and I always wonder what sources are best to use. So on this occasion, I'll use Le Monde, the French newspaper. And I'll read you this, which is from April of this year. On October the 10th of the previous year, official Israeli accounts relayed a sordid but unfounded allegation. 6 months later, it continues to circulate, fueling accusations of Israeli disinformation. Following the Hamas attack on Israel on October the 7th, 2023, which claimed around 1,160 victims, this is from April, images of the massacre flooded social media and news outlets around the world. But amidst this flood of accounts of murder, looting and mutilation, one rumour took on extraordinary proportions. 40 decapitated babies were allegedly found in the Kfar Azar kibbutz, one of the communities most impacted by the attack. This story and its variants went viral like never before, going as far as being mentioned by the White House. However, in the horror of the massacre, in which 38 minors, including 2 infants, were killed, there were never 40 decapitated babies, not in Kfar Aza, nor in any other kibbutz. The Israeli government press office confirmed to Le Monde, and there follows a fascinating article about how this false information came about. And I'm afraid that people who do what I do for a living will have disseminated that false information, which is forgivable, and never corrected or revised or refuted or withdrew it, which is not forgivable, and which adds to the sense of momentum that we are describing this morning. The time is 10:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:51 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And just in case you think that the abuse I receive is all one-sided, I think some of the ugliest contributors to this discourse are the people trying to rehabilitate Jeremy Corbyn's reputation in the context of continuing carnage in Gaza and Lebanon. I'm sure that all of the burning humans have fewer, greater priorities than calling upon you to erroneously claim that accusations of Jeremy Corbyn's proximity to anti-Semitism were somehow false. If only there wasn't pages upon pages of evidence to support that claim. But hey, keep the tweets coming. Keep the home fires burning. Keep the priorities clear. You know, how are we going to respond to a death toll that's rapidly approaching 50,000? We're going to respond by trying to resurrect the cult of Jeremy Corbyn. Goodness me. Estelle is in Hyde Park. Estelle, what made you pick up the phone?
James, good morning. It's
Hello.
good to talk to you. Thank you for taking my call.
You're most welcome.
I am a bit of a keyboard warrior as far as you're concerned, I'm afraid, because I have noticed that when we call up, and I say we as being British Jews, we tend to get a brilliant grilling. You're fabulous at what you do. And
it's not because you're a British Jew, Estelle, is it? It's because of what you might say.
Well, yes, and I hope you can.
And that's
give me
true
the
of all
chance to say
callers.
what I want
Well,
to
no,
say.
but I'm not going to conduct a conversation informed by your religion or your nationality. I'm going to conduct a conversation informed by what you say to me. So let's park that falsehood first.
Okay, well, shall we start with what you said right at the outset, which was that you were already being accused of being anti-Semitic for what you wanted to talk about this hour. And my suggestion to you is, and I'm not going to make a judgment on whether you are or whether you aren't, but the timing of this conversation is interesting. The timing of you choosing your first hour on LBC this morning to discuss the despots that are within the Israeli government going on a march this weekend regarding the
No, again, you see, I need to... No, you can't, because you're misrepresenting me. And but by the way, I'm responding to what you've said because you're misrepresenting me, not because you're a British Jew. We began by talking about the elimination of Yahya Sinwar and posed the question of what it might tell us about a change in the potential direction of traffic. And then I explained why my hope that this might prove to be a significant moment and move us faster towards a cessation of hostilities had been enormously and heartbreakingly undermined by the discovery that 1/3 of the lawmakers in Benjamin Netanyahu's government were planning to spend this weekend participating in an event describing the settlement, the illegal settlement of Gaza, as both victory and doable. So the conversation, and I apologize that it hasn't been clear enough for you to comprehend, the conversation has been about whether or not the elimination of Yahya Sinwar does actually deliver any hope for a change in the direction of traffic in Gaza and Lebanon, as we discover that Benjamin Netanyahu's own government is dedicated and now publicly prepared to pronounce its support for the illegal occupation of Gaza. So now we've clarified that.
Well, great. So you've given yourself another 2 minutes, then that's absolutely fine. So you could have talked about that on Monday. Here we go again. We could have talked about that on Monday. We could have talked about it on Monday.
And facts still matter.
So what is the fact that you can deal with concretely today?
So the first thing you've said about me and about this programme is demonstrably false.
It's a joke. You can deal with what you know, which is Sinwar is dead. No, what's extraordinary is you won't engage in a decent conversation about this.
Sinwar is dead.
Yes. And you asked...
And Likud is planning to... and a third of Likud...
Any hope, James? Do you not want to talk about
I've explained why it doesn't give me hope.
For any hope. Well, I think you... Yes.
And the reason is... the event that Likud is...
Anti-Semitic accusations.
No, let's talk about hope. Let's talk about Likud and hope.
You want to Israel bash
No,
today,
Estelle, I want to bash the people who are calling for the
Monday.
illegal occupation of Gaza.
Monday, James. Timing is everything. Context is everything. Take that debate to your listeners on Monday.
It will have already happened by Monday.
Today, oh, really? Well, I tell you what happened last night. There was lots and lots of posts on social media of poor Gazans wishing their IDF soldiers a happy Sukkot, referring to their encampments as Sukkah and praying for peace and ending with their prayers in Shalom. That is our cause for hope.
So here's my question for you, and you'll understand that this is... I'm conducting my phone. No, you can, like all other callers, you have to contribute to the conversation that everybody else is having. So tell me why they didn't say anything that was demonstrably false. They didn't say anything untrue.
Oh, really? Well, we could have another hour on that.
Well, let's do it now. What's been said so far that's untrue?
Okay, well, I haven't been listening to all of it, but I can tell you what was untrue. I haven't been listening to all of it because I went to go and guess.
I'm sorry?
I went to go and fact check, but the lady who was on
So you're here to critique 54 minutes of radio in a robust and unfriendly fashion And the second point you make, after a demonstrable falsehood, your second contribution is that you haven't listened to it.
Well, I've missed 2 minutes.
You just told me you could do an hour on what has been said that is false, and now you're declining the opportunity to spend 10 seconds doing it.
I think you're just giving ammunition to the hordes of people that think you are anti-Semitic, and I was hoping...
I'm sure I am, Estelle, but just tell me what's happened on the show so far that was false.
James, can we talk about why timing is everything?
No, we can talk about what's happened on the programme, apart from you, that's not true.
The Gazans and
what's
the
not
Palestinians.
true?
You're getting very angry about this, James.
I'm offended.
Talk about the Gazans and the... Oh, are you?
Yes, of course I am, because you're telling lies on my radio show and claiming that I'm doing something wrong. So what has been said so far that is untrue?
James, I think you started straying into defamatory territory. I'd be a little bit careful. I'm not
What?
telling lies.
No, you said that there was an hour's worth of material of what had happened on this programme that was untrue. And I'm offering you the remaining 2 minutes of this hour to run me through some of it.
Yes, lovely. Let's talk about Barbara. Let's talk about her comment that she said that Jews in this country were paranoid, and that you were being anti-Semitic, and she could understand why we were paranoid, and I think that is untrue. I don't think we're paranoid. I think we're realistic. I think we're facing an absolutely...
She was talking about the people supportive of the settlement in Gaza.
You are encouraging by not putting across good news when there is some, and discussing a positive...
We began the programme with the killing. We began the programme with the killing of the Hamas leader.
You gave it about 3 minutes, James. You did.
And then we explained why it is not as a hope-inducing moment.
And wanting to go on a march this weekend
okay.
to supplement it. It's just not helpful, James.
So what I wanted you to do, what I hoped you might do, is explain to me why my hope should not be diminished by the event this weekend.
James, before you say what you say, you are doing harm to the Jewish community.
Okay, Estelle.
In this country. Take my word for it, and you'll have to live with your own conscience. You need to be very careful. Stop stoking up this hatred. It's not helpful. We had a good news today. We all want a path to peace. We hate to see the suffering, and we want to end this war soon. Give the Palestinians the home and the protection that they deserve, and to get our hostages back, James. That's what this is about. We've got to get our hostages home, and we need peace for Israel. And frankly, everybody should be supporting that and should be rejoicing today that we might be able to see an end to this, rather than worrying about the next 6 to 12 months. Let's get the hostages home. Let's hope to God that Hamas do not have a leader that's willing to step into Sinwar's shoes, and let's hope for some resolution. Gosh, thank you for letting me speak. I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for answering the questions I'm about to ask you in advance. Could you run me through the things that I've said that aren't true?
Oh, James, we've done this. I've got my message across. I'm going to go and leave you and do something more worthwhile.
Oh, no, please don't do that, Estelle. No, please don't do that.
I'm going to because
please don't refuse to engage, Estelle.
No, I'm not going to refuse to engage.
Good. Then perhaps you could answer this. Could you answer this question then? You've expressed your desire to see a cessation of hostilities.
Yes.
Do you think that will be helped or hindered by the presence of a third of Benjamin Netanyahu's lawmakers at an event describing settlement as victory and calling for
I can't comment on that. I'm sorry.
Yes, you can. You have lots of opinions.
I do.
So do you think that peace? Do you think that peace?
Might be ahead of me.
Well, it's in the Times of Israel.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll go and look that up afterwards. If you're asking me if I think that's...
Well, let me read it to you.
Obviously, the answer is probably not.
Let me read it to you. Thousands of people turn out for an ultra-nationalist march and rally in Sderot to call for the rebuilding of Jewish settlements in Gaza. That's a photograph from May. You must have been aware of that. It was last May.
Yeah.
Okay, and now the new protest that is scheduled for this weekend sees 10 of the 32 lawmakers from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, including a cabinet minister, participating in a conference entitled Preparing to Resettle Gaza. This is scheduled for next week in the same area.
What does that mean?
And I'll tell you what it means.
Gaza?
It says victory is settlement. That's what it means. It says it is doable. I'm reading that from the WhatsApp channel. I'm reading that from the WhatsApp channel.
That's the problem, isn't it, with the written word? We don't have no idea the nuance of this. I
know exactly what that. I know exactly what that. Every single person listening. Yes, it means victory is settlement.
Well, then you're all better informed than me.
Well, we know that already. Everybody listening knows that, Estelle, because I've listened to the program that we're talking about. So the simple question, illegal settlements. The simple question is,
say illegal settlement?
they would be by definition illegal.
I don't know. I don't understand.
So you don't understand, you don't know, you're not informed, you're not aware, and you didn't listen to the programme.
Well done, James. That's what you always do. Okay, well, I thought you wanted to engage
Go on,
with
call
me
me
rather than just hurl
anti-Semitic.
insults. Oh, I'm not. I have.
Or are you
not
just going to
once
save it
called
for
you
Twitter?
anti-Semitic. I don't do Twitter, James. I don't do.
Sorry, you
social
told me
media.
you were a keyboard warrior when you came on the programme.
As in texting you. I think that's the keyboard.
Well, then
is
send
not
it in a
an
text.
email.
Send another text then.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry I've rattled you. I thought we might have had a better conversation than this.
No,
but,
you didn't. It's gone
well,
entirely in the opposite direction to what you hoped. Because I keep asking you for evidence. I keep asking you to support your claims. I keep giving you space to prove that you're right.
You haven't proved.
I've proved two things.
Proved me wrong.
I've proved two things.
I'm really upset about that, James. Okay, it makes you more dangerous than I thought you were.
Next time you ring in.
Sorry.
Next time you ring in.
Well, I won't be calling you again, will I? It's a bit of a waste of time.
To be fair, I doubt it. But if you did, make sure you've listened to the programme that you're trying to critique.
Minus 2 minutes. I think let's be accurate here. Let's be accurate. And I could have missed a lot in that 2 minutes, I grant you, but somehow I rather.
So you only missed 2 minutes and you still can't name a single falsehood.
Can I just answer the question that you asked?
No.
James O'Brien on LBC.
6 minutes after 11 is the time. We may move on to new territory. I'd say one thing. Thank you for... I don't know if it's the right phrase to use, but thank you for your kind words and compliments with regard to my handling of the last call. But please, please, please don't go away thinking that Estelle speaks for a large constituency of people, or certainly that she speaks for all Jewish people or all people who are supportive of the modern state of Israel, because that would fuel anti-Semitism. And I'm sure that wasn't her intention. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. Should we talk about Kemi Badenoch instead? Should we move on to slightly less controversial territory? I want you to listen to what one of the most hideous remnants of the last 14 years of Tory rule, and this character is still in Parliament, had to say about Kemi Badenoch being a mother. We'll have a little look at that later. But first of all, well, no, actually, let's have a listen to it now.
I myself am supporting Robert Jenrick because I think he's brought more energy and commitment to the campaign, and being leader of the opposition is a really demanding job. And as much as I like Kemi, I think she's preoccupied with her own children, quite understandably. But I think Robert's children are a bit older, and I think that it's important that whoever leads the opposition has got an immense amount of time and energy.
Sorry, Christopher, can I just clarify that? You're saying that a woman shouldn't be standing to be leader of a political party because she's got young kids?
I'm not saying that at all. I was one of Margaret Thatcher's strongest and staunchest supporters.
What's giving you that concern, though?
Well, what gives me the concern is because I understand from talking to colleagues that Kemi spends a lot of time with her family, which I don't resent at all. But the consequence of it is that you can't spend all your time with your family as at the same time being leader of the opposition.
I'm tempted to play that again. It's 2024, right? I think Robert Jenrick's got 3 children. I'm old enough to remember when Andrea Leadsom was arguing that you couldn't be the leader of the Conservative Party as a woman because you didn't have children. Is there any way we can find out whose side Chope was on in that contest? Do you remember? Andrea Leadsom gave an interview to the Daily Telegraph or the Times in which she talked about how she didn't think, effectively saying that she didn't think Theresa May could be leader of the party or could be an effective prime minister because she didn't have any children. And now you've got someone who is from the same wing of the party, unfairly known as the lunatic fringe in some quarters, but someone from the same wing of the party who is saying that Kemi Badenoch can't be leader of the party, and therefore, I mean, in Andrea Leadsom and Theresa May's case, of course, it was de facto prime minister as well. But you've now got somebody claiming that you can't be leader of the Conservative Party because you have got children. And some people think that they're in some sort of existential death spiral. I don't think you can have a phone in, can you, in 2024 about what his point was? Or whether he has one? Certainly not in the context of remembering what Andrea Leadsom had to say about Theresa May. It's a figure of speech, Callum. When I say I'm old enough to remember, the joke is that it wasn't actually that long ago. It was in 2016. It was 8 years ago that a senior Tory, a leadership contender no less, came out to state that you couldn't really hope to lead the Conservative Party if you didn't have children. And now you've got one of the, I would say, morally ugliest members of the Conservative Party. If you look at his voting record, there's some evidence of true hideousness there. You've got one of the ugliest dinosaurs of the Conservative Party coming out to say that Kemi Badenoch can't be leader of the Conservative Party because she has got children. Now, I want you to tell me your story. I want you to tell me your Kemi Badenoch story. I don't want you to ring in with stories about Kemi Badenoch. I want you to tell me, and I don't want to alienate older women, but it has to be from, should we do it from 2016? It has to be since, in the 8 years that have elapsed, since Andrea Leadsom claimed that you shouldn't really be leader of the Conservative Party if you didn't have any children, to 2024, when Christopher Chope has opined that you can't really, or you shouldn't really be leader of the Conservative Party if you do have children. I want your evidence of similarly antediluvian behaviour. I want your evidence, the story that still makes you wince. I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that as a man, I'm still quite surprised by stories like this. I'm still quite taken aback by the what's the word I want? Shamelessness isn't fair. But what word would you use to describe the casualness or the confidence with which he said this stuff? The readiness? Is it the readiness? There's always a slight danger with a certain type of politician, of all political hues, that you think that they're doing what some radio phone-in hosts do, and what I used to do, which is saying deliberately provocative things for effect, a sort of Jeremy Clarkson style of rhetoric, which has its place in newspaper columns, but probably doesn't have its place in conversations such as this one. But Chope may have been doing stuff like that. I don't think so. I mean, the stuff he's done on upskirting, I think on a pardon for Alan Turing, there's all sorts of things on his voting record that are questionable. But I want a stronger word than readiness. I kind of want a single word that describes what the kids call with their full chest. So when the kids say that they're doing something with their full chest, it means that they're right out there. They're really doing it. That's what I don't get. If Christopher Chope was saying this privately, if he was talking to his wife or his colleagues in the Reform Club, he was like, well, she's all right. She's strong on this and she's strong on woke culture. I'm not going to do a phone-in about what? Abandon. No, it's not quite with abandon. Blitheness, brazenness. Somehow this is turning into a phone-in about what word I'm searching for to describe Christopher Chope. Is it brazenness? It's not brazenness, because brazenness means that you know that you're saying something provocative. It's the insouciance? Is it the chutzpah? No, again, chutzpah is like a courage thing. It's good to have chutzpah. Extreme self-confidence. Audacity? Is it audacity? It's audacity, isn't it? How is he? No, but it's... Let's not have a phone-in about what word I should... Glee is pretty good, actually, Steve, although it's categorically not the word that I'm trying to describe. So the 8 years have elapsed since Andrea Leadsom told Theresa May that she shouldn't be leader of the Conservative Party because she didn't have any children. And today, Christopher Chope is telling Kemi Badenoch that she shouldn't be leader of the Conservative Party because she does have children. I think we can fairly conclude that neither of those accusations would have been made had either of those candidates been men. I don't think anybody told Ted Heath that he couldn't be leader of the Conservative Party because he didn't have any children. And I bet some people did tell Margaret Thatcher that she couldn't be leader of the Conservative Party because she did have children. But happily, she ignored them. Or unhappily, And of course, nobody knows how many children Boris Johnson has got. So once again, he gets a sort of exclusion from this entire conversation. But had it been a man, neither of these accusations would have been made in a million years. Nobody would have said, oh, yeah, of course, Boris Johnson can't be Prime Minister because he's got so many children. But Boris Johnson can't be Prime Minister because he's got more children than anybody can count. Because he won't tell us how many children he's got. Actually, some people did say that, but more as a reflection of his honesty and his relationship with the truth and his moral incontinence than on the actual nature of parenthood. So in 2024... as many countries have moved to almost complete equality in the workplace between men and women, the Conservative Party remains a place where somebody who gets a vote on who will lead it can base that vote on whether or not a woman has young children or not, or indeed whether or not she chooses to spend time with her young children. And I want your example. I want you to tell me about the time that you sort of choked upon the comments of a colleague or possibly a family member. It's got to be in the last 8 to 10 years, ideally 2016. I'm certainly not going back before 2010. I bet mothers-in-law have got form in this space, haven't they? The idea that as a woman, your ability to do both a job and be a parent gets questioned in a way that would never happen to a man. That's all I want you to talk to me about. Chope is too thick to realise that Robert Jenrick has children. Or I am too thick to realise that there's a profound difference in 2024 between being a father and a mother, even as most families juggle childcare, base decisions upon joint conversations, take decisions together. Perhaps not in the Chope household, but almost certainly in the Badenoch household, and I suspect in the Jenrick household. But what happened to you in the specific context of men thinking that women can't be both parents and competent workers? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 17 minutes after 11. God, you are annoying. I'm going to take this one on the chin, Iris. You are running a discussion about preconceived notions, and then you have the bloody cheek to casually scorn mothers-in-law. I'm so angry. You decry an attitude, and then you do exactly the same. I think you've got me there, actually. And obviously, I didn't mean all mothers-in-law, but Christopher Chope did mean all mothers, didn't he? He's saying if you've got young children and you spend time with them, then it compromises your ability to do your job. You cannot be both a mother and an effective employee. And nobody would ever say that to a man. No one would ever say to a man, you cannot be both father and effective employee. So all I was alluding to, Iris, was the possibility that when it comes to generational difference, women today are more likely to be exposed to generational disagreement when in discussion with their own mothers or mothers-in-law about the ability to be both mother and effective employee. For the record, Kemi Badenoch has 3 children, aged 5, 7 and 12, while Robert Jenrick has 3 daughters, aged 8, 11 and 13. But Christopher Chope has a problem with Kemi Badenoch's ability to be Tory leader and no problem whatsoever with Robert Jenrick's. Have another listen to what he had to say.
I myself am supporting Robert Jenrick because I think he's brought more energy and commitment to the campaign, and being leader of the opposition is a really demanding job. And much as I like Kemi, I think she's preoccupied with her own children, quite understandably. But I think Robert's children are a bit older, and I think that it's important that whoever leads the opposition has got an immense amount of time and energy.
Sorry, Christopher, can I just clarify that? You're saying that a woman shouldn't be standing to be leader of a political party because she's got young kids?
I'm not saying that at all. I was one of Margaret Thatcher's strongest and staunchest supporters.
What's giving you that concern, though?
Well, what gives me the concern is because I understand from talking to colleagues that Kemi spends a lot of time with her family, which I don't resent at all. But the consequence of it is that you can't spend all your time with your family as at the same time being leader of the opposition.
Wasn't Keir Starmer getting into trouble from the same people 10 minutes ago for wanting to spend time with his family on Friday evenings? He's 25 years older than me, Christopher Chope. And in some ways, what I just heard sounded like something from the 19th century, not even perhaps from the 1950s. Where is he coming from on this? The idea that if she spent less time with her children, he'd be more comfortable voting for her to be leader of the Conservative. There's something here I can't quite pin down. I want you to pin it down. I want what I always want. I want the what and the why. The what is what happened when you came up against an attitude either the same as that or like that in real life, as it were. So rather than in political discussion, the moment you realised that you worked with and possibly for somebody who thought that being a mother made you a worse employee or a worse colleague. 0345 6060 973. The specific moment, the specific experience when you realised that you had a colleague, or worse still, a boss, who honestly believed that the moment you became a mother, you became a worse colleague or a worse employee. All right? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. And the second bit of this conversation is, it's not, I really don't want it to sound as if I'm suggesting for a moment that well, no, I don't need to explain. I'm not suggesting for a moment that Christopher Chope has a point, but I think a 25-year gap between me and him, what has happened in that quarter of a century that could make what he says sound so obnoxious and so alien to somebody our age, to somebody my age or younger? Okay, so I want the what of it, the moment that you encountered something that could be loosely described as similar, the realization that you worked with someone or for someone that believed you became an inferior or a lesser worker the moment that you became a mother, or the analysis, if you like, of what on earth has happened. What is that difference between somebody who, at the age of 77, can blithely, insouciantly, superciliously, I'm still getting word suggestions, make a statement like that without realising how it's going to land with everybody else. And they're queuing up, inevitably, to criticise him. Victoria Atkins, who's a Tory MP backing Robert Jenrick, says this is the 2020s, not the 1950s. She talks about how working mums and dads must juggle family and career. I think that's the point. Does he not realise that for anybody under the age of 60, and certainly everybody under the age of 50, it's a joint effort, it's a joint enterprise. It's mum and dad who are juggling the twin demands of the workplace and the family, the twin demands of childcare and breadwinning. It's a double act now. Society hasn't necessarily caught up with that division of labour, but families have. Families are in it. Families are up to their neck in it on a daily basis. Christopher Chope seems to be entirely detached from it. So give me a quick comment. I've taken back what I said about mothers-in-law. I just think that it is likely sometimes that your mother-in-law might hold the view that you can't do the job and the childcare in the way that Christopher Chope does. I was trying to sort of imagine a woman who might subscribe to a similar school of thought. But it is much more likely to be men. I think it is anyway. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 23 minutes after 11 is the time. Also, stuff that we want to talk about on the programme today. I'm toying with the idea of wading into a discussion about Elon Musk's behaviour at Twitter. The problem I've got, of course, is not knowing how many people are actively engaged in it. You're either heavily engaged in it or you're not engaged in it at all. So let me know what sort of direction you want me to take on that. And we may have a little look about what happens to people who call for other human beings to be burned alive in their beds in the context of sentencing. Let's have a little bit more of Christopher Chope trying to sort of justify his extraordinary position.
And you could argue that Margaret Thatcher's family suffered as a result of the commitment and dedication which she gave to leading our country.
It's perfectly fair. It's a fathers go into Parliament.
It's a perfectly fair point, and
it's not.
Where you're not involved, you haven't got a vote in this procedure. It's a perfectly fair point, and if you're looking forward to Kemi becoming Prime Minister, that's great. I don't resent you saying that.
Okay,
just very quickly, what's your view on this?
Many women will be shocked by those comments. I'm really proud that we live in a country where we've had women who have become Prime Minister. We've got the first woman Chancellor at the moment. I think there should be no barrier to women standing in public life.
You're completely misrepresenting what I said. What I'm talking about is the time commitment involved in being leader of Her Majesty's or His Majesty's opposition.
25 minutes after 11. I mean, it is objectively extraordinary, right? That in 2024, with a vote in the selection of the next leader of the Conservative Party, you can think that it is a valid contribution to the conversation to claim that the fact that you spend a lot of time with your family is a reason why you can't be leader of the opposition. And also, maybe there's a little bit more to understand in the context of him claiming that Margaret Thatcher's children would have suffered from the amount of work that she put in as Prime Minister. But you would never say that about a man. And that seems to be the sticking point past which people like Christopher Chope not only can never get, but also never want to get. There's no desire on his part. You can hear it in the way that he spoke to the Labour MP, the female Labour MP. Oh, you won't even have a vote in it. You can hear there's no desire or responsibility at all to get to a place where you might understand why your comments have caused so much offence. I find it, at the age of 52, almost inconceivable that he's only 25 years older than me. It sounds in many ways as if he's 125 years older than me. But if I was a woman, I suspect that I would be less surprised. which is where you come in. 0345 6060 973. Sophie's in Kingston. Sophie, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, James.
Hello, Sophie.
So, I had this experience where my first baby 10 years ago, I was 26 and I was working really hard as an assistant buyer and was put on a special sort of fast-track scheme to become a buying manager and completed the course while on maternity leave with a very supportive manager. But when I came back, was pulled aside and told they were really sorry they've offered it to somebody else because they don't promote people with young children.
Which is supposed to be illegal, I think, that kind of discrimination. But what did they think you would do that would have made you a less attractive candidate for promotion than somebody who didn't have young children? Because there's not a lot I like about Cami Badenoch. I'm not going to lie to you, but I do like the idea that she has children aged 5, 7 and 12 and is determined to make waves in the workplace. So that is a good example to set to other people.
I think, as they explained it to me, that the other lady who had offered it to had worked really hard and sort of picked up the slack while I'd been off. And, it was that of, they saw it, I think a little bit like Chris does, that somebody else is working really hard and maybe you're not really putting in that effort, even obviously I was on maternity leave. And this was a large...
Do you think Christopher Chope felt that the late Queen was incapable of doing her job properly when she had young children? I mean, she'd have more help, I suppose. I don't know how wealthy the Badenochs are. She'd have a little bit more help. There'd be nannies and boarding school was just around the corner. But I suspect he'd rather chop his own fingers off than publicly opine that the late Queen should have known her place and not aspired to running a country when she had young children at home that she was keen to spend a lot of time with.
Yeah, for me, I think my message would be to try and have a little bit more sort of pushback, because at the time you feel like maybe you are letting people down, you have taken too much time off, you have had to leave early because of your child's been ill or a nursery pickup or something. But actually, as 10 years older now, I absolutely would.
Dads should be doing. Well, I know they don't. It is more often still more likely to be the mum that steps into these particular positions, but it could just as easily be the man. Jonathan, probably the winner of these of texts along a similar theme, and he writes, Margaret Thatcher's children undoubtedly did suffer, James, throughout the time that she spent as Prime Minister, but not nearly as much as the rest of the country did. I don't know. And Karen says, oh my God, just last week, James, my friend was asked at an interview whether or not she had children. So this is the problem with my slightly arrogant insistence that you can't have a phone in 2024 about whether or not Christopher Chope's point is shared or whether or not it's worth wondering whether he has a point. If lots of people out there, either implicitly or explicitly, subscribe to a similar view, if people are asking Karen's friend at a job interview whether she has children or not, and you know they wouldn't ask a man, or at least if they did ask a man, they'd be making conversation, they wouldn't be establishing his suitability or otherwise for the job, then you do kind of nudge the door open for the possibility that Christopher Chope is simply getting a kicking for being too silly to realise you're not supposed to say out loud what goes on quietly and indeed silently in the minds of many employers, male and perhaps also female. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Apparently Boris Johnson has been asked on his book publicity tour how many children he's actually got. Did you know? I missed this. Did you know this? Guess, have a guess. Do you know how many? What's the question? How many children has Boris Johnson got? Are you holding, how many? I can't see how many fingers you're holding up. Well, have you got all 5 up on one hand? Okay. I thought it might be higher than that. Also, how do you know he's telling the truth? It's the first time ever, if he is. But 8 is the figure that I'm being told. On a podcast, someone asked him how many children he had, and he answered 8. Off the top of my head, he's got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 and a half. Well, anyway, no one ever suggested that not knowing how many children you've got would be an obstacle to being leader of the Conservative Party, but spending time with the 3 that you have got, according to Sir, remember, this is the kind of man that gets a knighthood in the modern Conservative Party, Sir Christopher Chope, that is indeed a problem. Charlie's in Plymouth. Charlie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. It's the first time I've ever called you, so I'm apologise if I'm a bit nervous.
I feel we should make more of a fuss. You should turn it into more of an event. I wish I had cake or something.
The reason I've called is because this is something that I feel this really close. It's really close to my heart. I work as a surgeon, and I'm also a mum of 2 really small children, 1 and 3.
Wow.
And I have a kind of interesting perspective in that my husband and I graduated at the same time and went down similar kind of career trajectories. Yeah. He's an anaesthetist, I'm a surgeon, but essentially long career training, and it's just a long path. We've obviously both got the children.
Yes.
But so unfortunately, the way it works in today's society is that I've obviously taken time off from maternity leave. I had nearly 2 years being pregnant because obviously making a baby takes time.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Yes.
And I was quite unwell when I was pregnant, so I wasn't able to work kind of to my full ability. And then actually where we are now is I'm sort of 4 to 5 years behind where he is. I earn considerably less than he does. And now going back, I mean, I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. We work on calls. We can't manage both of us working full time.
Right.
So he's further ahead of me. He earns more money. He works full time. I work 80%. And so I will now finish and become a consultant, sort of really quite far behind him, sort of 7-8 years behind him. So I'm putting less away into my pension. I mean, all of the problems that go over that.
How much more could he have done? Honestly, and no one's listening.
Yeah, no, so he's amazing.
Okay.
He does loads, but he didn't take any time off because maternity leave, I mean, it's okay, but actually they don't really tell you. You're only paid for a few months.
Yes.
And then you're not paid at all for essentially 6 months. And, when you have like a mortgage and lots of outgoings, you kind of need that salary. He could have taken shared parental leave, but then I would have gone back on a much lower salary and he would have had nothing, no pay at all. So there's no properly ring-fenced paternity pay.
And it doesn't, and oddly, given that so much of the tax calculations treat you as a double act, treat you as a couple, actually parental leave doesn't. I've never thought of that before. So you describe powerfully an epic imbalance in the foothills, if you like, of parenthood. But by the time your children become 5, 7 and 12, would it be reasonable to suggest that you're going to be a less valuable or a less effective employee than your husband is?
I'm already a less effective employee. Like I'm already slightly rubbish at my job.
I'm sure
the
you're
first
not.
one.
Well, I hope you're not.
No,
you're a bloody surgeon.
No, but it's things like, if there's an interesting case that I need for my portfolio that comes in at 6 p.m,
yes.
I can't stay because I've got to go to nursery pickup. My childless colleagues who are wonderful, they can come in on Saturdays. They can come in whenever they want. We often have this really awkward thing where I'm working nights and he's working days, and so often he has to rush home as well to be. But I think we are more ineffective. We are sort of, I guess our employers would describe us as less dedicated, but we're not less dedicated. We just have another full-time job, which is being parents.
I wonder whether or not the system supports mothers in the House of Commons more than it supports mothers in the NHS. I suspect it probably does. And I don't know what the childcare arrangements are here, but I'm fairly confident that if Kemi Badenoch has to stay in the House of Commons for a late vote, she will be doing so. Not least because the whips would expect it. There's
totally.
No equivalent of whipping. So.
But there's that thing of what do you actually do with your children? And I've said this to senior male consultant. Surgery is not typically a very female specialty.
No.
And who are sort of well, you do have to stay. And I'm actually I really can't. There's sort of no one else to pick up my kid. If I don't go and get them by 6:30, the nursery closes. That is literally my job as well. And
so if Christopher Chope was talking about you would reluctantly concede a fraction of a point.
So he
or maybe
has a
more,
point, unfortunately.
More than a fraction of a point. But he's not talking about you. He's talking about an MP in the House of Commons to whom an awful lot of what you've described would not apply.
But I don't know when she had her children. I don't actually know really much about her background, about how she came to the House of Commons. But
she once worked in McDonald's. She once worked in McDonald's and immediately became working class. That's all you need to know about her background. And then when she stopped working in McDonald's, she immediately ceased to be working class.
Yes,
and she once illegally hacked into Harriet Harman's computer. And she's put her foot in her mouth several times during the leadership campaign. But she doesn't need to apologise because she never makes any gaffes. She told us that as well. But anyway, so 5, 7 and 12. Oh,
I think
Lord.
5, 7 and 12 is really little. And also my older one now goes to a preschool, which is like sort of part of a school. They have really long holidays. They're on holiday for like 12 weeks in a year. So you've got to figure out what to do about those times. And also schools are really, I found that they only ever call mum when there's a problem.
Never dad.
They expect you to be at the kind of 10 a.m. assembly. Oh, but they've been practicing so hard. And I'm like, I hear that, but you've told me that a week in advance. I can't,
All right, then.
Let's magically be there.
Okay, let's bring it down to brass tacks. If you had to choose the next Prime Minister of this country, and all other things being equal, would you choose the father rather than the mother for the reasons that you've described?
No, I wouldn't. And I tell you why. Because women are amazing at multitasking. They can hold so much information in their head. I say I'm a bit rubbish, but actually I'm a decent surgeon. But I also totally
the nation
manage
breathes a sigh of relief, particularly residents of Plymouth.
The ones in Plymouth, yeah.
Yes.
And actually I do all of them. We talk about mental load a lot, but the mums take on so much of that mental load, and we do disproportionately more childcare than men.
So what's your criticism of Christopher Chope then? Because it's different from mine. In fact, it's a bit more thoughtful than mine.
I just think it's the wrong way. He's thought about it the wrong way. Like, yes, she does have young children, but actually, when you're a woman and you've got 3 young children, and 3 children is totally different to 2. I have 2, and all of anyone who has 3.
Yeah.
You are a superhero, basically. You're much. You're a mum and you're working and you're trying to be Prime Minister. I mean, I don't like her. I don't agree with what she says, but she wants to be leader of the Conservative Party and she's got 3 young children. I just can't, I'm amazed. That is incredible.
This is where the big gender gap is. This is where the big gender gap is that you looking at something and seeing someone pulling it off, and Christopher Chope looking at something and seeing someone that he wants to criticise and put down.
But it's like you were saying yesterday, there's when you go to university and you're privileged and you have all those amazing A stars, and you're looking at someone who's done less well, but who's probably way brighter than you, but their circumstances meant that they didn't get those A stars. It's the same. Like if you've done well as a working mum, you are amazing.
There's 2 things I've said this week that might be relevant to what you're saying, because I forget what the precise context was, but Nick in Edinburgh obviously pays as much attention as you do as well, because apparently earlier this week I said what a working woman really needs is a wife.
I so agree.
And that makes me sound a little bit like, well, it doesn't, because I'm not suggesting for a minute that you shouldn't be a surgeon, or I'd rather be treated by a male surgeon, but that the system hasn't necessarily caught up with the reality of lives like yours. Thank you, Charlie. You've no idea how much it warms the cockles of my heart when a caller references something that's happened. There's 2 things I think you can say that make my heart sing professionally. The first is, we were having this conversation at home last night, or we were having this conversation at home last week, when it's not an immediately obvious conversation news-wise. It's not like, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how cross are you about Taylor Swift? It's a slightly more thoughtful and nuanced conversation, and we've correctly kind of reflected each other's worldviews. And the second thing is what you just said, when you see links between the conversations that we have and themes pop up that you think, oh yeah, that applies to this and this applies to that. And she's absolutely right. We were talking yesterday about what the Social Market Foundation called assumed knowledge. I did a lovely full disclosure yesterday with Dan Snow, the history guy, the history man, the historian even. And he's so powerful on this. Oddly enough, he's a trustee of the same charity that I'm a trustee of, which looks to help people who are not born with the sort of advantages that people like me and Dan Snow have, get into the sort of industries that me and Dan Snow, or Dan Snow and I, have got into. And he speaks about it so powerfully. He really does. It's a thing of beauty. And it was one of those moments where the radio show bled in to the podcast interview completely, because we were talking about the things you don't realise about other people's existences, the gap you don't notice, regardless of which side of it you're on, whether you don't see the advantages that other people have, or you don't see from the position of advantage the disadvantages that other people have. And Christopher Chope, I think, is an incredibly powerful example of that, not giving it any thought at all, not even trying to understand. And then Charlie just nails it in a single call. You look at a woman doing what a mother does while holding down a tough job, and you lift them up and praise them. Or you're Christopher Chope. You look at a mother doing a difficult job, and you conclude that they must be demoted and denigrated and considered lesser than the man. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Stella Creasy, who I think was the MP who breastfed her baby, or certainly took her baby into the chamber, didn't she? And is therefore a particularly interesting commentator on cases such as this, has said, this is why we urgently need paternity leave sorted. And this tallies up to a point with Charlie's contribution, doesn't it? Because until people start wondering whether dads get distracted by their kids as much as they do mums, we will always have dinosaurs walking amongst us, or in this case, on the modernisation committee in Parliament. Oh, irony is dead. Did you know that? Did you know that Sir Christopher Chope was on the modernisation committee in Parliament? Can we get a little list of his greatest hits before 12 o'clock? Can we just some of the things that the member of the modernisation committee in Parliament has shared his opinions on? And did we find out whether he supported Leadsom or Theresa May back in 2016? Can't find it. All right, shall I crowdfund it? What's it called? Hive mind. Shall we hive mind it? Can anyone find out, or rather, can you find, I'm talking to you, aren't I? Can you find out whether or not Chope was pro-Leadsom or pro-May in 2016? Because I've got a hunch that the old child question... Anyway, I don't want to jinx it. Neither do I want to jinx this, although at 11:49, I'm quietly confident that I won't. Something about today's show has been so far extraordinary and possibly unique, especially when you consider the subject matter of the first hour. Something about today's show has been extraordinary and possibly unique. And I'm quietly confident, to give you a second clue, a first clue actually, I'm quietly confident that this extraordinary and possibly unique phenomenon is going to be sustained until at least 12 noon. So prizes for anyone who can work out what it is. Well, not prizes, plaudits for anyone who can work out what it is. But can you think what it is? I didn't notice it. Keith didn't notice it. Eleanor didn't notice it. But Roxy noticed it, the assistant producer of the programme. Something about today's show that has been extraordinary and possibly unique, and something that I'm confident will be sustained until 12 noon today, and something that I rather like, actually. Caroline's in Morpeth. Caroline, what would you like to say?
Is it that all the callers have been female?
Oh, spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
I did it. Was that right?
Yes, it was. Isn't that amazing?
Oh, I got something right. One of your questions right for once.
It flies in the face of all sort of lazy radio phone-in stereotyping, but it's something we've apart from me, all the contributors so far, you're right, have indeed been female. Isn't that lovely? Anyway, that's not why you rang in, but well done.
It's not. I'm a bit nervous to talk about this, so
okay, we'll take all the time you want.
Loads of word soup going to come out.
Okay.
But I'm really glad Charlie was before me, because she actually covered loads of points that was sort of a scramble of things going on in my head. But I'll start with my experience, which is, so I was working in a company as associate director. It was a sort of small engineering company in London, and I was offered a partnership, so to buy in as a company director. Yes. And obviously you've got to go through all the sort of directors' agreements and contract stuff. There was two other company directors, and one of them had sort of made what I felt a bit concerning comments to me about an employee who was she'd come back from maternity leave, so she had a child, and there was sort of lots of eye rolling, lots of dinosaur comments about not being dedicated or whatever. And I sort of just alarm bells started to ring, and I thought, okay, I need to sort of make sure that whatever is in the contract means I'm not protected, but means if I do have babies, and my husband and I were planning on it, but the directors didn't know, that would all be sort of in writing. And as soon as I sort of said I wanted a meeting about this and to talk about what happens if and when I need to talk about maternity, and suddenly the whole conversation just changed. So just as a bit of another spoiler, I did become director, because at that point your producer said, did they not give you the offer? And they had to at that point, because obviously they already had, so legally they'd be absolutely screwed if they sort of pulled it. But everything, the whole conversation changed to, well, how are you going to manage this? Do you not want to wait till your kids, till you have kids and get that over and done with? Can you be a director and, give it all the, required attention? One of the directors just didn't, his face just said it all. There was no sort of misunderstanding in reading that.
How surprised were you?
How surprised was I? I wasn't surprised because...
But you were shocked. I don't know what the right word is.
I wasn't shocked.
No.
I wasn't shocked. I felt very powerless. So there's a Sheryl Sandberg book. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one she wrote about... Lean In, it's called, Lean In. And it's all about this whole thing of sort of, don't give up the promotion until you need to. So there's no point in sort of disclosing this whole thing of, we're trying for a baby. If, it might not happen that point, and then you've just sort of given it up.
And you're not allowed to ask, although obviously, as Karen told us, it happened to her friend last week, so people do ask, but you're not... You're not allowed to ask, so never volunteer any information in that space, presumably with Sheryl Sandberg's advice.
Exactly, and not in any sort of deception way. It was more a case of don't do yourself out of an opportunity before it happens.
Exactly that, yes.
Here I am torn between, this whole... most women I speak to, when they have this thing of they've got to admit to their employees that they're pregnant, look
at the language you chose. Look at the word you chose.
Deliberately, exactly. Like, oh, God, it's the cringe. I've got to, tell them how much of an yes, God. So I'm torn between this, feminist, logical feminist I've got, Sheryl Sandberg with this whole cringe of, oh, God, I'm going to be this awful inconvenience.
And how did it work out?
Well, it worked out terribly, but it was just everything, basically.
Sorry.
Everything Charlie said, but there was a lot of real resentment after that. So when I did have a baby, real resentment between that difficult character. But actually, the end of this is he got tremendously drunk at a Christmas party and admitted all of, we wouldn't have, if you deceived us. We would, if we'd known that you were going to have kids, you would never have been made a director.
Good Lord.
All this stuff. And I just, you just think, oh my God.
There it is.
If that's, exactly. There it is. Exactly that.
So Christopher Chope in a different suit.
Indeed.
It would appear. It's pretty, I love the assumed knowledge parallel that Charlie drew, because some of the stuff you're describing is going to make every woman listening at the moment nod sagely and familiarly in the same way that you were during Charlie's call. And yet I and many men listening will be, really? You actually, you chose the word admit to describe telling your female colleagues that you were pregnant?
No, male.
Sorry, I meant male. That was a misspeak on my part. Because you know that it is going to be responded to with rolled eyes or heavy sighs.
Well, even if not overtly, definitely covertly, because, even very progressive other directors that I know of different companies that I'm friends with, they say, logically on paper, I know this needs to be a move we need to do, but it is, having babies is an inconvenience for everybody because job cover and whatever else. But the other one thing...
Yeah, but it wouldn't be if men and women were treated identically in the workplace. I need to do more research on what happens in Denmark, because I keep banging on about something that Mrs. O'Brien and I did, I think 16 years ago. We did a job swap with a Danish couple who had a similar family situation to us, and we couldn't believe how similar their experiences were in the workplace and how different ours were.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Charlie's point that I was like, yes, that was the bit about the mental load. We've got 2 kids now, and the kind of school WhatsApp group, it's all the mums, even though they're all working as well. It's all the mums in there doing all the admin, which I know, sending one message is sort of 10 seconds, but it's the whole cumulative thing of it.
It's there. And yet the way to fix it is obviously not to decide not to give women a break in the workplace because of the unfairness of the system that we're all describing. And the way to fix it is to make the difference between the father and the mother much, much smaller, to the point of disappearing. Caroline, you did brilliantly. Why did people who think that or say that they're nervous often turn out to be such brilliant contributors? And why, harking back to Charlie's call, why would I never get a call off a man? And I am a man, lest there be any doubt, and I would definitely never say, I'm a rubbish radio presenter and a rubbish dad. I would never say that, even if it were true. Shut up, Keith. No, it isn't. You've never met my children. No man would ever ring in and say, I'm a rubbish surgeon and a rubbish dad. They just wouldn't do it. But women, it almost implicitly, surreptitiously conveys the pressures that you're constantly under and that sense that you can never actually complete the achievement, unlock the achievement, as you would say in video games terms. Thank you, Caroline. Lexi is in Brent, which means the entire first 2 hours of the programme have consisted entirely of female callers. Lexi, what made you pick up the phone?
I'm actually calling about my husband's perspective.
I thought you were going to say I'm actually a man then. The whole theory would have fallen apart.
But I think I can't speak on his behalf because we have 2 small children.
Yes.
He works in a corporate environment.
Yes.
And full-time. I work part-time in healthcare.
Right.
I myself have had experiences of sort of, not discrimination, but I sort of have been deprioritized because I work part-time. I haven't been given opportunities because I work part-time. And childcare is just too expensive. And so that is the setup of our family.
The system is discriminating against you.
Exactly.
Not the employer, as it were.
The most significant thing that's come out of our parenting journey, and it's not about mom or dad, but as parents, is that my husband, as a male, has been told, you prioritize your family too much.
Wow.
Or you should find more balance in prioritizing your children.
Is he in finance?
He's in finance.
Yeah. So is Cammy Badenoch's husband, actually. I don't know.
So I don't know how they're going to manage because if either parent has to deprioritize their family in order to provide more balance in inverted commas at work, it's extremely difficult.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And I think lots of women will agree with me that as mothers we get it's the expectation is that we can be more flexible, and I think in a way that's good, but it also means that we do get deprioritized.
No, I don't think it's good. I mean, it's good in the sense of it's better than what would happen if you weren't flexible, but it's not good that your flexibility is taken for granted because that's part of the reason why the unfairness sustains, isn't it? Why the status quo sustains, and then people like Chope wade into the equation, misunderstanding everything and possibly making everything worse, even though, as lots of women have explained, that there is an imbalance in the system that is, to a degree, reflected in his comments. So, I mean, just a few, thank you, Lexi, a few things that he has voted against, or rather objected to bills on criminalising upskirting, criminalising female genital mutilation. I think he blocked personally a proposal to make upskirting a criminal offence, and indeed objected to plans to grant Alan Turing a posthumous pardon over his conviction for homosexual activity. He objected to plans to host a global women's conference in the Commons, Kel Surprise, faced criticism for referring to Commons staff as servants. And I mean, that's just scratching the surface of Christopher Chope's greatest hits. And yet he was nominated to be a member of the Modernisation Select Committee by the Conservative Party. You couldn't make it up.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 12 is the time. I have a problem sometimes with, well, I've got lots of problems lots of the time, but I have a problem with specific stories that I want to talk to you about if I haven't got any personal handle on them at all. Do you know what I mean? I'm desperately racking my memory banks to see whether or not I've got a personal experience that fits into the category that we're about to describe. It's an article that I've had it. Do you know I've actually got a folder? Here's a bit of a YouTube exclusive. It's live from 1984. I actually carry around a document wallet. You know those old cardboard folders that we used to have? Is this the content that you were talking about, Keith? Is this what you give for the YouTubers? You give them content that you don't get on the radio or the podcast, exclusive content. So with all the little stories in it that I might... What's this one? Hang on. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. That I might come back to next week or later in the week. Some things linger in my... Should I call it a document wallet or a folder? Anyway, some things linger. It's a nice word. Some things linger in my document wallet for ages, and some get culled quite quickly. There's a thing called conference syndrome. Well, I call it conference syndrome. When you're on newspapers and you've got a story, I've told you this before, you've got a story, and it's a decent story, but it's got a long shelf life. There's no reason why you need to publish it tomorrow, because either no one else is going to beat you to it, or no one else is going to want to publish it. I was a bit of a specialist in the second category. I was good at coming up with stories that my editor found interesting around the conference table, but which no other newspaper editor in the country would have contemplated printing. So usually at 11 o'clock in the morning, as we all came out of editorial conference, my showbiz story would be slated for page 5 or page 7. And then some proper news would happen in the course of the day. And so my story would get bumped off, and the editor or the news editor would say, we'll run it tomorrow. But of course, when tomorrow comes around and you're sitting around the same table offering up your new ideas for the new edition of the newspaper, and you say, oh, and we've still got that story left over from yesterday, oddly, even if it got bumped for unfair reasons, if it was actually a really good story, the fact that everyone already knew about it, even though it hadn't been in the paper, gave it a kind of air of disappointment. It had a sort of air of failure attached to it. So it would hardly ever get into the paper. And I consoled myself by calling it conference syndrome, especially if it was someone else's story on my team, and I'd have to go back and say, I'm really sorry, I don't think we're going to run it after all, but it was a really good story. Don't feel bad. It's just conference syndrome. And conference syndrome is that idea of it not being fresh anymore, And I suffer from it here a bit as well. So, we need usually 3 subjects, don't we, to talk about together. Some of them I come to really reluctantly, but with an air of responsibility. First hour of today would be a fairly good example of something I wish we didn't have to talk about. And just because some people choose not to talk about it doesn't mean that we can choose not to talk about it. Some things we have to talk about, particularly if our position, our perspective on it is a little bit rare in the vista of the UK media. The same was true of Brexit, actually, although I never felt much reluctance in talking about Brexit. I do now. That was the only other suggestion on what was unique about the show up until 12 noon today. Mohit was the only one who came in with, is it that you haven't mentioned Brexit? And you were absolutely right. I think we got to 12:08 without mentioning Brexit. I'm pretty sure we've done entire shows without mentioning Brexit. We just forgot to carry on noticing, didn't we? And a shout to Mark in Harrow as well, who I think is yanking my chain, but may not be. He's yanking your chain as well. When he writes, James, I'm a man and I'm a rubbish surgeon and a rubbish mum. Yes, he is definitely yanking our chain. 12:08 is the time. So I don't necessarily, I'd say something stays in the folder when the time isn't quite right. And the reason why this one has stayed in the folder is because I haven't got a personal experience of it. Particularly on Fridays at 12 o'clock, I like to go off on a bit of a flight of fancy. I might start waxing lyrical about gully suckers, or telling you about my old PE teacher, or revisiting some of the greatest hits of anecdotes that I've shared with you countless times over the course of the last God knows how many years. What was it like? Is due a bit of a run out soon, isn't it? I haven't done that one for ages. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. But I've still got a couple that even a producer of 2 or 3 years standing is not going to be as familiar with as perhaps you are as a listener. I was supposed to do one this week about the psychotherapist in New York who's got 2 billionaires on her books, but we got, again, overtaken by events. That's one of my favourite stories. But this is absolutely fascinating. Emotional vampires and how to survive them. I'm just going to let that settle, because some people will already know what I'm talking about. Emotional vampires and how to survive them. Do you have a friend or acquaintance who leaves you feeling drained every time you meet? That's question 1. That's the question in the stand first. The 2 lines that appear below the headline in a newspaper article. And it's a really nice piece. It covers an awful lot of ground. It's well researched. It's got loads of case studies. And it is utterly, utterly persuasive. There are some people, a psychologist tells the author Elle Hunt, there are some people who have an excessive need for attention and validation. I want you to pay attention to all of this, all right? They are often overwhelmingly negative or display a victim mentality, refusing to believe that anything that happens to them is their fault. A lot of times they don't actually want solutions or advice, they just want to offload. And while they might be intently focused on themselves, there's not a great deal of self-awareness. It's almost an absence of empathy, but an enormous demand for somebody else's empathy. I'll give you another example from another psychologist. She says, when somebody is an empathic human being, even if they have a high need, when they reach out for support, they will be aware of your emotional state first. They might ask you if now is a good time to talk, or pick up on cues to suggest that it isn't. Emotional vampires pay no such mind at all. They are only caring for their own appetite and their own needs. Now, the crucial point here, is that the behaviour is consistent. So, and this is why I think it will be an interesting conversation for us to have together, because it's not just about last weekend when you couldn't believe how selfish your friend was. She didn't ask me once about myself, just kept banging on about her boss and her boyfriend and her bloody baby. That's not it. It's as if that is every single encounter you ever have with that person. You come to a realisation years in to a friendship that you never get anything back. Not just that there's a bit of an imbalance there, 52-48 perhaps, 60-40, but you sort of... Some people will be listening to this now, and it's men and women this, although I am kind of tempted to try to get all the way through to 1 o'clock without any calls from men, but I think that's a little bit... I'll probably get into trouble with the Equal Opportunities Commission. It's probably discrimination. My name will be Mud. My name is already Mud in the manosphere, or whatever they call it this week, the incel centre. But it could equally be men. It doesn't have to be women. But I am struck by the fact that some people may be listening to this right now. You may be listening to this right now and just going, "Oh my days, that's it. That is. I've never quite put my finger on why I dread seeing someone who is, on paper, one of my best friends, or even perhaps my best friend. Why do I dread seeing them?" Here's another case study. Ellie used to wonder why she always felt drained after spending time with her friends. Then she noticed that they were constantly complaining about their jobs or their partners without ever taking steps to change. Or else they would select an unsuspecting victim and sink their teeth into them. They never wanted to hear about Ellie, about the changes she was making in her life, the business she had started, and they certainly didn't want to hear that it was going well. She said, "You almost felt like you couldn't fit in with them unless you were moaning about something." I think the phrase fun sponge fits here, although it's probably trivialising matters slightly. The notion that I guess it would be egocentrism, but to the exclusion of interest in anybody else. If you do challenge them on it, says the first psychologist, Susie Redding, if you do challenge them on it, they're so resistant that you might end up getting attacked. That rings a bell. You might end up getting attacked when you challenge somebody else's worldview. And their worldview is that everything's awful, everything's unfair, nothing's ever their fault, and they are by far the most interesting person in any room. If you spend time with someone who's actually fascinating, it's not actually that annoying. If all they want to do is talk about themselves. In fact, full disclosure, the better the episode, the less I talk about. You choose someone, but they're not going to be like that around a dinner table. They're not going to be like that in company. The friend, so this is where it is. So you might be temporarily more demanding. Less present is the therapeutic term. So you might have just broken up with a partner, you might be suffering a period of poor mental health, but in a functional friendship, there would be a give and take. It might not be 50-50, but there would be a sense of balance. What is known as an emotional vampire will resist that equilibrium entirely. There'll be no attempt to hide a fundamental egocentrism. So it means that you slowly, and I think there's a frog boiling analogy here again, isn't there? It's probably our favourite analogy on the programme. But the realisation that this is what is going on will not be immediate. The bit I don't get, the bit I want your help with, is how you become close friends with somebody like that when you get nothing positive. So we're seeing some friends for drinks tonight. And when I see the diary that Mrs. O'Brien spends a little bit more time on than I do, but you've got a shared calendar on your phone, and you know that if you had a dial or a meter measuring how excited you are about seeing people, it's going to have different results according to who it is that you're seeing. So I'll say, we're having dinner with them, and I might be 6 out of 10. Oh, good. Occasionally it might be, I'd rather not, actually. I'd rather stay at home, but duty calls. People we're seeing for a drink tonight, really looking forward to it. Can't wait. Some of my favourite people, we'll have such fun. Don't see anything like enough of them. Former colleague, actually, former producer of this programme, and I know we'll have a ball. And the first thing that I'll do when I sit down is say, why don't we do this more often? But if you've got friends who are hitting 0 when you see them in the calendar, why do you stay friends? You've got friends who literally, according to this case study here, they make you go, oh. And I think the answer to that is that you don't realise it happens slowly until one day, and it could be now, it could be at this moment in time, you're sitting there going, oh my days, he's an emotional vampire. When's the last time you got anything out of that friendship? When's the last time they expressed any interest in you or in your life? When's the last time that they made you feel upbeat and happy and cheerful after having a cup of coffee together or going out for a drink, as opposed to the polar opposite? I think that's the starting point. What's it like to be in a friendship like that? 0345 6060 973. And when and how did you realise? And if you've just realised now, I won't make you answer that question. I'll allow you to confine your contribution just to the first one. So what's it like to be in a friendship like that? How do you explain to yourself? And of course, it could include family members, although, oh my days, does it include family members? My sister, OMG, says one text. Another, please don't mention my name, but I often refer to my mother as an emotional vampire. I often think of her as narcissistic too. Are they the same? We were talking about that in the news. Offering up examples that I felt were closer to narcissism, because the key difference would be not that someone talks endlessly about themselves, but they are or that they're really not interested in you, but that they're constantly complaining. So a narcissist might spend their entire life telling you how wonderful they are. That's not emotional vampirism. The novelty might wear off, although it's very kind of you to continue tuning in. But the idea that it is a constant cavalcade of complaint and misery, that's 100 times more draining than narcissism in an upbeat sense. But yeah, so we're going to have to include family members, aren't we? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And the two questions are the reality of the relationship. What is it like to be in a friendship like that? And when did you realise that the traffic was almost entirely one directional? I'm going to give you an example of how the people who are in this category are probably completely unaware of it, okay? So Des has been in touch to say, all this is so rich, from James Me O'Brien. Boarding school, me. Kidderminster, me. My dad, the Daily Telegraph, Kidderminster, the Express, me. Boarding school, me. So when you turn up, if you've still got any friends, and start singing from that particular hymn sheet about how awful everybody else is, and you choose to tune into a radio station every day even though you hate the presenter, and it gives you ammunition to be miserable about it, or that you're the vampire, mate. That's the point. I'm giving you joy. I'm the most interesting thing in your life at this moment. 19 minutes after 12, the best thing that you can do with your entire existence is listen to me on the radio. So I'm the opposite of a vampire. I'm a pleasure giver. I am. I'm a fire starter. But you are I don't know. I hope you're not quite as sad a sack as you appear to be. But the people who are emotional vampires, I think we can confidently state will have no clue whatsoever. And I don't think if you tried to tell them that they were emotional vampires, that they would thank you for the intervention, as Des is no doubt currently in the process of proving. 20 minutes after 12 is the time. 0345 6060 973. But if you are one, or you thought you were one, can you change? That's because I hate the idea of irredeemable conditions. Can you change? Can you grow? Can you fix it? Can you become more fun, better company, a better friend? Can you become a better friend? I imagine it's something therapy would help with, but you'd have to know you had a problem to start with. And how are you going to know that if you're going to bite off the head of anybody who tells you? Should we get the phone lines open? Tell me about the emotional vampire in your life. 0345 6060 973. Tell me when you realised you had one, and tell me what you've done about it, if anything.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Oh my days, you've gone bonkers for this. You've gone absolutely mad for it. Although not as much on the phones, for reasons that are pretty clear with all the ones that begin, please don't mention my name, but you are describing my sister. Ian says, it's taken me 46 years to fully recognise what you've just described in one friend. It's so gradual, James. This one, I was married to an emotional vampire for many years. I would describe it as being sucked into a vortex. Their life and their needs completely subsume yours, the only priority until no one else ever matters. Unsurprisingly, I divorced him. It's very common. I did not know this. Well, you wouldn't, would you? It's very common to set up secondary WhatsApp groups with the emotional drains excluded. At a certain age, you realise who are your radiators. Oh, isn't that lovely? We all want to be radiators. And many OMGs, probably more OMGs in my inbox on this one than I've had on anything in a very, very long time. OMG! I have a lovely friend. This is so me. I have a lovely friend who I love and respect dearly, but I have pulled away from over the last 12 months as she makes me feel exactly like this. Years and years of the same complaints, relationship issues, but she won't change things as she can't because it's not that easy. If she ever does ask how I am, it's after a couple of hours. And whatever I say is always turned back to talking about her. During the day, I might think I'll reach out to meet up, but then by mid-afternoon, I think I really can't be bothered. It's just too exhausting. So I think she thinks now that I'm an awful friend as I'm not there for her every day as I used to be. Big difference here. Another one saying my sister, because if it's a family member and Christmas is just around the corner, I'm not going to read out any names on this, whether you've asked me to or not. Christmas is just around the corner. You're asking, can we come up with solutions? I think if it's a friend, the solution is probably to walk away. If it's a family member, obviously that's not an option. The emotional vampires are my mother and siblings. My mum is the puppet master manipulating everybody. And this is probably the longest example that we've got. I was in a friendship for 53 years. We lived opposite each other. We grew up together. We went to the same school. I think now I was slowly boiled by a narcissist. She would pull me down by making personal comments that made me feel so self-conscious. I thought all this was normal, but it came to a head when we were out for a meal with her friends and family, and she tried to make me look bad. This had previously been a regular occurrence. For some reason, I finally saw her for what she was. I told her that this was not what a friendship should be, and I ended it there and then. I haven't looked back since. It's mad that 53 years it would take you to reach that point. How would you describe it to somebody who, despite my brilliant introduction, still doesn't know what I'm talking about? 0345 6060 973. Tom's in Durham. Tom, what would you like to say?
Hi, we've got a...
Oh, hang on, there's something weird about your voice. I can't quite put my finger on what it is.
One.
Oh, you're a man. That's the first bloke.
I'm the first man of the day.
12:26 man, and you're the foot. You are. Go on. What do you want to say?
So, me and my wife's got a friend who actually got us together in the mid-90s. Right. And we don't call her an emotional vampire. We call her the fun sponge.
Really?
Yeah, because she comes up to our house once, twice a week, and she absolutely drains us.
Completely, and you know it's going to happen. You're not
we
even.
We know it's going to happen. She turns up with a bottle of wine, and then for the next 2-3 hours, me and my wife just sit in silence and listen to her life.
Drama, and complaint.
Drama. But the thing is, it's not just a drama, James. It's a reenactment of each and every drama in her life.
Wow.
And
how much interest does she? Well, if she got you together, though, that speaks of a...
Yeah, she got us together, which I'm thankful for. But it's tiring, James. She leaves our house, and me and my wife are emotionally drained after she leaves because we can't comprehend that someone's life is so chaotic and is like that.
How long have you been together, you and your wife?
30 years.
Whoa.
She's been our friend for 30 years.
Oh, boy, I did not think you were going to say that, which means you probably won't be able to answer my next question, because I imagine in the early days you sat there thinking, oh, flipping heck, how much more of this is there going to be? But I can't really talk to my wife about it when she's gone because it's her best friend. But at some point you realise that you were both having exactly the same reaction to the friendship.
It was my wife that brought it up to me, actually.
Did she? What happened?
Yeah.
Tell me.
It's just a combination of her life, her problems, and, you know, when you're sitting with someone and you and your wife have got that look where you look to each other and just you roll your eyes, and it's not a roll of the eyes, but it's something as
you don't even need to
way.
roll the eyes. You couldn't even spot it with a microscope. The only person in the world that can see it is your partner.
Your partner, exactly. And me and my wife, as soon as she comes in, we give each other that look, and it's like, oh my God, 3 hours of this.
It's amazing, isn't it? And you carry on with it. Why? Out of loyalty? Out of kindness?
I think because she feels that safe that she comes up to us and she spouts off, James.
Yeah,
so
but why do you carry it? Why don't you hide behind the sofa or try and...
I do.
Oh, all right.
I'm so... It's getting to the point now where I'm so abrupt with her.
Oh,
it's
really?
Like, yeah.
Well, she'll start moaning about you to your wife when you're not there.
My wife would tell us.
Yeah, I'm sure she would.
I know she would tell it. And, like, I'm classed as a miserable sod now but I'm only a miserable sod when she's around.
She just brings it out in you. That's fascinating.
She just it's unbelievable. Don't get us wrong, James. We absolutely love it a bit.
Well, that's the bit I do get puzzled by.
She's our best friend.
And yet, that's what the relationship is.
Yeah.
Hang on. There's something about you in this article. Here it is, right there. To characterise one person as the predatory bloodsucker and the other as their hapless victim can be reductive. After all, vampires can't prey on just anyone. You have to invite them in. If someone has managed to get into this position of being completely domineering, then obviously we've allowed it to some extent. And that's what you've done. But you are not... I mean, you still love her. So you're not... You don't... I mean, how would you feel if she never came round to your house again?
Would be devastated, to be honest.
It's a mad thing. It's such a strange species, aren't we? And you're good people, you and your wife, and you think that without you in her life, even though all she ever does is tell you how awful it is, it would be even more awful if you weren't in it.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've hit the nail right on the top of the head there, because we think we're an outlet for her, and yes, it is hard work when she comes
bet
up.
The fact that you're carrying it together actually makes it a heck of a lot more bearable than if you were carrying it on your own. I love what you just described about the little glance between two people blessed with a happy marriage, a really happy marriage, when you just kind of go, I don't know why I'm doing it. You just kind of go, I do it with Keith, actually. And with Eleanor. There you go. I've got 3 happy marriages in my life. So, but you know what I mean. I mean, you got a caller and I just go, okay, that's fine. And that's what it is. But if you're both doing it, if you're both involved in it, then it's, I reckon, it's much more than half as stressful. It's probably a 10th as stressful. A problem shared is not a problem halved. It's a problem decimated. How interesting. Tom, thank you. It's 12:31. Jenny Barsby has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Always calling on you to do research on my behalf. At least 2 of you think that Christopher Chope was undeclared in the leadership battle between Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom. You remember Andrea Leadsom said Theresa May couldn't be leader of the Conservative Party because she didn't have any children. Christopher Chope is of the view that Kemi Badenoch cannot be leader of the Conservative Party because she does have children, or at least she has children with whom she's keen to spend time, which puts me in the extremely unfamiliar position of briefly warming to Kemi Badenoch. But nowhere near enough to... Oh, I don't know that I'm ever going to warm to Robert Jenrick. So, yes, I guess she would be ahead in my favours. I think, we're just talking about it a bit in the break, this emotional vampirism. I think it was Graham Park. The reason I'm mentioning the research you do on my behalf is if you listen to the podcast as closely as you listen to the radio show, then you'll be able to tell me whether I'm remembering this right or not. No, it wasn't Graham Park. He was a brilliant guest on Full Disclosure a couple of weeks ago. Someone was telling me about the... in every group, there is a something. Do you remember this? In every group, there is a something. In every group. Was it Graham? And if you don't know who it is, it's probably you. So we just had some slightly uncomfortable conversations in the studio about whether or not you have emotional vampires in your life. I do, actually, but nowhere near close to anything that I'd share on the radio. The possibility that if you don't think you've got any emotional vampires in your life, then you could be the emotional vampire. But then you'd have to be fairly clear-eyed about how much time you spent with your friends complaining about everything and never showing any interest whatsoever in what they do. Actually, I don't have an emotional vampire in my life because I'm reading your descriptions of what it's actually like, and I think I've just got a narcissist in mind. 12:36 is the time. Louise is in Acton. Louise, what would you like to say? What made you pick up the phone?
I heard you just mention the phrase emotional vampire, and I just went, Mum? Immediate reaction.
Really?
I just thought, oh God. So my mum and I, it's a tricky one. I feel like the tricky thing about it is the emotional vampirism thing is not always there every single minute, every single conversation, but it's definitely a strong prevailing trend. So my mum and I are currently estranged. I hope we'll make it up one day, but we'll see what happens. I went back into therapy this year because of her parenting and long-term impact of that. I was in a really bad place mentally, forewarned her about that. She basically bullied me into telling her why I was in therapy. I told her, and she began screaming at me that I wasn't being compassionate enough to her for her parenting.
Wow. Is that what? Are you sure that's not? I mean, this is a hair to split, Louise, and it's your hair, so tell me to shut up. But is that not narcissism as opposed to emotional vampirism? No,
because I think with narcissism, it's about being sort of self-aggrandizing. With my mum, if you point out something she's done wrong, the flip side is, oh, I'm a terrible person, I'm an awful human being, I hate myself, I'm a failure. But she goes straight into like excessive.
But does she mean it though, or does she mean it when
so.
She does that, or is she just trying to manipulate you into being nicer to her?
Possibly a bit of both. I think the thing with this, I think part of me, the victim mentality that I've seen my mum doing with every part of her life for as long as I've been alive, and I know longer than that, is that you have to tell yourself that you're the victim all the time, and you have to believe it, or you can't really live that way. Which is why anything that suggests you're at fault, you have to react negatively to it. Because the vampirism thing is also like every single small problem in life is a huge, great big deal that she can't deal with. No one is ever compassionate or kind enough to her about it. You can never give her enough sympathy or kindness for it. If you point out she's perhaps exaggerating some of her problems. I mean, I'm more like her complaining about something to do with her work. I mean, my dad earns quite a lot of money. Right. They live in a really beautiful listed flat in Bristol. Mum didn't have to work for 30 years. Sure. I was going through a really tough time at work, and she flips it onto her tough time at work, which is not really comparable.
So every story you tell, every confidence you share has to be brought back to her, even though her experiences are not that relevant or as important.
Yeah, and in many ways, she's got a lucky, very lovely, objectively, and she hasn't worked for 30 years, she's got loads of money, she can go shopping whenever she likes, objectively, like a very lovely, middle-class, rich lady kind of life.
When did you realise this wasn't working?
Really, I think so. We had a tricky relationship for a long time.
No kidding.
Very similar. So I'm in my early 30s now. Very tricky relationship in my teenage years. I moved out of town. I came to London. Had a much better life.
Yeah.
Got into therapy on and off, but didn't really understand until this year how much of an impact her behaviour had on me. Again, she was just perpetually. Again, it comes back to when my sister and I were teenagers, because she was just perpetually unhappy, and it was my fault that she was unhappy. And then it was my sister's job, and that was as children, it was my sister's job to fix it. So while I've ended up not being able to, I really struggle with loving relationships. My sister is, I think therapy is amazing.
Yes, it certainly
I'm a great therapist. And the irony is that right before my mum began screaming and shouting at me, as an act of trying to look like a nice person, she gave me a load of money for therapy and then began screaming and shouting, which was quite funny to me. But there we go. Because my sister has very strong people-pleasing and very socially anxious tendencies.
Well, we just talked. We literally just used that phrase, people-pleaser. So the idea that if you are a people-pleaser, you'll be like a magnet. So I suspect your sister is not estranged from your mum.
No, she's not. Interestingly, both. So my boyfriend thinks that I should stay estranged from my mum, and my sister's boyfriend thinks that my sister should be.
Oh, wow.
So external people. When I told my friends what happened earlier.
Well, hang on a minute. How do I know? I'm saying this in fun.
Apologies.
No, all right. How do I know you're not the emotional vampire? Because all you're doing is complaining to me about your mum.
That is true, but again, you can ask.
Yeah, well, that's the answer to. You're doing a phone-in, O'Brien. It's literally you're going to start attacking all your callers for ringing in to answer the question that you asked them. It's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, you asked for it. And I guess rather than saying my friends, I paid my mother technically, and my dad eventually. I told them to pay for me to have a therapist. I was like,
have you ever?
I'm not going to tell my friends about this.
Do you ever finish an interaction with your mum feeling better than you did before you started it?
That's a tricky one. I'm going to go with sometimes yes, but also because and there's a downside to this, in that my mother is also an alcoholic.
Oh, Lord.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
So that's terrible. I know your therapist would have told you this, but you can't engage with the authentic self of an alcoholic.
No, of course not.
Even if they haven't had a drink, because they will be craving the next drink.
True. That's also because for me, so my sister doesn't drink at all.
Yes.
I'm not an alcoholic, but I say that I can become alcohol dependent in a bad place in my life, right?
Of course,
I often drink a lot with my mum.
Oh, okay.
I think partly
and then you
to
get maudlin.
how irritating
you get
she
maudlin
can be.
together, and
yes,
then that's the closest you have to a positive interaction.
Yes, or you just feel numbed to how negative she is being. I think there was a Christmas.
I'm with your boyfriend, Louise, on this. The more I talk to you, the more I understand why your boyfriend is keen for you to keep this distance. Well, that's a terrible thing to say because I've lost a parent, and I'd give anything to spend 10 minutes with him, and you know, so I shouldn't make light of your estrangement. But I do understand the point at which you realise that a relationship. This is why I tried to draw a distinction between friends and family in the context of emotional vampirism, because with family you can't walk away anything like as easily as you can from a friend. Do you still have a relationship with your dad?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think my dad for a long time really normalised mum's behaviour, and I think he still normalises it now.
But he has to.
Yeah,
doesn't he?
That's exactly it.
To get through the day.
Yeah, so but he completely, like when I told him after the big bust up earlier this year, I said to him, like, I don't know when I will see my mum again.
Okay.
And he completely supported me back. I think a few times he veered into normalising what she'd done. I'm like, nope, absolutely not.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And when I expressed to him how upset I was about that, he stopped doing it. My sister completely backs me. And I've seen both of them since. So for me, it's sad to my mum in my life right now, but it's also...
But it's better for you, and that's what your boyfriend recognises. I mean, he's coming at it entirely from interest in your welfare, and therefore he can make that contribution to the conversation. But hopefully everyone recognises it's a dealing issue and not a permanent issue. Thank you, Louise, and I'm sorry for what you're going through. You wouldn't wish it on anybody, would you? And as I did suggest, sort of clumsily, it's going to be 100 times worse when you're talking about family in this kind of space than it is if you are talking about friends. And here is part of the answer to the question about that ability to change. If you are doing even a modicum of self-work, which is another phrase to describe therapy, then they may be able to hear you. But in most cases, they're not, and that's why they have those patterns. So they need to want to change. They need to be in therapy for this to work. For any feedback to be received in good faith, there has to be a desire to change. And of course, there's also often unforeseen costs to speaking one's truth. It may not get you anywhere, and in fact, it may create rupture, which is exactly what Louise just described. And that was one of the psychologists. A lot of you are asking for the provenance of this piece. I can tell you it was in the G2 section of The Guardian on Monday, under the headline, Emotional Vampires and How to Survive Them. And that's why it made its way into my document folder and has stayed there all week, because I felt it would be a suitable conversation for us to have sort of on that Friday lunchtime when the urgency of following the news agenda just begins to dilute slightly, and I think that decision has been borne out by the quality of the contributors today. I wish you could see my inbox. I mean, I can only read out a small amount of them, but it has been buzzing throughout this hour with quite familiar stories, but not with identical ones. And the majority of it is indeed looking at family members rather than friends, which, as I suggest, is going to be a much harder problem to navigate than it would be with a friend. Jane says, I was today 8 years old when I realised that my sister-in-law is an emotional vampire. And quite a lot of you being suddenly realise, oh my goodness, James is describing my sister. If my phone rings, my husband and my 10-year-old daughter know exactly who's on the other end of the phone, because all I ever say is, oh, and and yes, and huh. I never get a chance to talk. I never get asked anything. I told her recently I'd just been promoted at work. She congratulated me and went straight back to talking about herself. I won't read out the next bit because it's an identifying circumstance, but you haven't put your name on it anyway. But I better safe than sorry. Eh?
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:48 is the time. I almost feel like what's the word? Guilty about pulling down the blinds of your life in some way and revealing that you have emotional vampires in them. I mean, you already knew, you just didn't know that it was a thing that many other people would recognise. It was a sort of recognised condition. But goodness me, I can't remember the last time. Let's try and think what the last time would have been when we talked about something on the show. It was having a narcissistic parent, wasn't it? And I think we've moved into similar territory with this one. If I was a little stricter, I'd have tried to steer it back towards friendships as opposed to family. The calls have been about friendships mostly, Louise notwithstanding, but the texts are almost all about family. I wanted it to be more about friends, but it was my fault not being clearer about that. I want to play you a clip of one of my favourite Full Disclosure episodes of all time. I know that there's one I wasn't happy with, but I'm never going to tell you what that was or who that was. There was nothing wrong with it. The problem, do you know what the problem is when I tell you that there's one episode of Full Disclosure I was unhappy with? You come back at me with suggestions and you make me paranoid because you say, oh, was it so-and-so? And I go, no, that was a great one. I thought that was a brilliant one. What are you talking about? When I was doing the book tour, people quite often come up to me and go on, tell us who it was. And I'd say, no, I won't tell you. And they go, I know who it was. And I go, who? And they'd say, I go, no, don't. How can you say that? That was some of my finest work. That was a brilliant interview. You should see the fan mail that we got for that. So I'm never going to tell you who it was. And I wish I'd never told you that there was one episode of Full Disclosure that I was not happy with. Only one out of all the Full Disclosures we've done. But I always like it. Sometimes I like it even more than usual. And actually, is that even true? I'm usually telling you that the one I'm about to share with you is one. But this is David Jason, lads. Sir David Jason to you, Keith. This is Arkwright. This is Scullion. This is whatever his character was in A Bit of a Do. This is Del Boy, Trotter. This is Jack Frost. This is Danger Mouse. This is David Jason. 1 hour with me. I missed my dad so much that day because to come off air, and he was a Yorkshireman, I've told you before, and I had a lovely chat with Mum about it as well because as I talked to David about it, there's some television, and I don't know that the children understand this today, the television that you would all watch together. You could watch it with your nan. Think of the royal family, you know. You could all sit in front of the television. It was class blind. It was utterly democratic. Those programs that worked for everybody. It's what Gogglebox feeds into a little bit, except you very rarely have the whole family, like 4, 5, 6 people. Everything David Jason ever touched fitted into that category. Pa Larkin, the original Darling Buds of May, just extraordinary and such a thoughtful man. I just loved it, and I really miss my dad because I'd have come off air and I'd have said, Dad, I've just done David Jason, and he'd have been, oh, what was he like? Normally he'd pretend not to know who it was, or he'd be like, I'd give him a ring sometimes, and I'd say, I'm on the telly at the weekend. He'd go, all right, I'm mowing the lawn. But with the David Jason, he'd have been, oh dear. It is the creme de menthe of podcasts, this, and here's just a little taste of it, because there's stuff you might not know about the parts he didn't get, the parts he nearly got. He was almost in Monty Python. It's quite a roundabout story, but he was very nearly in Dad's Army. And why he is and remains so brilliant at what he does, I honestly think, as an interviewer, that I got really close to the magic potion that he possesses when it comes to creating characters that we all love so much. Here's just a little flavour.
When I left the theatre that year, and then you couldn't get any jobs, I went back to being an electrician for a while.
That must have been tough. Did you feel you'd had your one bite of the cherry, or did the positive thinking kick in? No. Positive thinking kicked in.
It's I'm on it now, love. I'm up and running.
Yeah, I had a taste.
I've got something that I can prove to people. I spent a year in Bromley Rep. Yes. I have qualifications.
Yes, and because of that energy you feel in a room when you do what you call your business, you know that you've got something not every actor has.
Well,
you need to hold on to that, David, surely, otherwise you'd give up.
I think you're right. Of course you're right. That you've got to hang on to something, because when you get kicked back, which was the 2 major jobs that I lost, like that one in Dad's Army, it knocked you right on the floor, because that was going to be a television series. And who knows where that would have ended up. Well, we all know where Dad's Army ended up, but that would have put me on the map, as I thought, but it wasn't to be.
Well, no, who knows where you would have ended.
No, exactly.
Because it might feel like a missed opportunity, but, as we've said, sometimes it's all about where the planets end up, isn't it? So obviously that period of unemployment, although tricky, was not long enough for you to consider knocking it on the head. Then you start playing a variety of roles. You're David Jason, of course, by now, because there was already a David White registered with Equity. I think it was Humphrey Barclay that saw you in
end of the pier in Bournemouth.
At the end of the pier in Bournemouth, which is how you ended up doing Do Not Adjust Your Set on ITV.
Yeah.
We've done that hideous double of 67 and 68, where two hugely successful television shows had you involved in their embryonic stages, and then didn't have you involved in when they went ballistic. But you never sort of lost. You never lost hope. But what you did do is have a slower rise through the next few years, from the sort of late 60s onwards, and I think I understand something now that I've met you that I didn't understand before we sat down. When you read about actors doing radio or actors doing stuff not immediately prestigious, and you think, oh, was he slumming it, or was he? But you would have loved that just as much as you loved everything else, because you were there building characters again, whether you're doing Weekending or whether you're doing The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It doesn't really matter what the stage is, because for you, the big thing has always been creating that character on that stage.
Yeah, the work. It's the work ethic.
It's always the work.
Yeah, and I loved it. So I didn't care what I did.
Yes.
As long as I was working, as long as I was doing acting and being somebody else and creating somebody else. That was most important to me. So I just sort of grabbed at virtually everything.
Just grabbed at virtually everything. That is, I mean, we could have literally just stuck a pin in that hour of conversation and found you a lovely nugget. I should thank her more often, but Helen Burke, who produces the Full Disclosure podcast, did some extraordinary research on that as well, because at one point, I just got a message off the people I'm meeting for a drink tonight who were actually listening to the programme, so it's a bloody good job I said what I did, isn't it? But Helen wrote something about David Jason being given 5 detective books to read and invited by ITV to choose which one he'd like to play. And he chose Jack Frost. And I said this to him in the middle of the interview. And he looked at me for a moment as if I was talking Mandarin. And I had completely forgotten about that, James. And that's a sign of a producer doing some pretty first-class research on a program, on an interview program. Back to Emotional Vampires. Sheila's just come into the studio. Tony is in Greenock.
I'm the opposite of an emotional vampire.
You are the opposite. What is the opposite of an emotional vampire?
An absolute delight.
Exactly that, a walking empath. Tony, I haven't got long. What would you like to say?
No, just everything you've said today resonates, and I've had a light bulb moment. One of our friends is exactly what you described. She's a lovely woman. She would not harm a fly, but my God, she could kill a room.
Really? Really? It's your second husband to say, one of our oldest friends who we love dearly, but she just sucks all the joy out of every room she's ever in.
Yeah, and a lot of what your first husband said, I'm repeating, because I no longer, if my wife says to me, oh, so-and-so's coming over, I say, well, I'm going out. I'm not wanting to be there, because it's all, what you're going to get. She's been on holiday with us. She's been away. She's taking the kids away together with them, and I can tell exactly before she goes what the issues will be, and they get the stories when they come back, and they're exactly what they are, because she's no awareness of other people or their feelings or emotions. She's very self-obsessed. I mean, she's been through a hell of a lot. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
She's a lovely, lovely woman.
But
I wouldn't wish any harm on her.
But she never asks about you.
No, but our friends group use it as kind of therapy. We talk about the stories and we laugh about the stories.
Right.
But we all agree that she is a nice person, but she just isn't interested in us at all.
I think everyone listening has probably got a little glimmer of and not remotely interested in you at all. I've worked with people like this. I'm blessed not to have any in my friendship group that I certainly none I can think of off the top of my head. But coming up to 12:59, and I apologise. Do I apologise to everybody who suddenly realise they have someone in their life like this, or should you be thanking me for bringing it to your attention?
I find narcissists, when they're obviously non-violent, I find them fascinating.
They are fascinating. An emotional vampire is slightly different, but not well, because a narcissist could be constantly telling you how wonderful they are, whereas an emotional vampire will always be telling you how awful everything is and sucking their life. Oh, dearie me. There was a little bit more of me than usual in that clip of me talking to David Jason, but he is 84 years old, and the bulk of the main interview, I think I stepped back a little bit from the microphone.
I read the other day a definition of narcissism, that
it was Jimmy Carr, the comedian, who said, a narcissist has the illness, but you have the symptoms.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, Lord.
Thank you, Jimmy Carr.
Thank you, Sheila Fogarty. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts. So download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.